All right, there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. I don't know how many people are going to tune into this live stream. If you do tune in and you want to post a comment or say something, feel free. But I'm actually doing this because I'm talking about another conversation, and I wanted to do this live stream because I thought it would be a little bit easier to do, whether people tune in as much or not. Because yeah, this is just going to be a conversation, especially responding to my comment section. And if people join in and view the video and they want to, kind of comment as they go along, that's perfectly fine too. But anyways, so the conversation is going to be once again about Oleksandr Usyk, and hopefully the audio seems okay for this. I'm not really using a high quality mic. I'm just using my laptop, and the volume is just going through. But anyways, Oleksandr Usyk, of course, he was able to recently beat Tyson Fury in the rematch this past weekend, and this has now caused a certain amount of uproar because now some people are calling Oleksandr Usyk an all-time great level fighter. Some people are even calling him the greatest heavyweight fighter that's ever been around. Now, I'm not quite sure if I would agree that he's the greatest heavyweight ever, but I would say that he's an all-time great level fighter. I would say that he's a future first ballot Hall of Famer, and I do think that he is an all-time great level fighter. But we're going to be talking about that as it goes along. But anyways, so what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be looking at my comment section in my most recent video because there was a certain amount of comments that brought up some arguments about Alexander Usyk and what they consider to be an all-time great, and I just thought that it was very particularly interesting. But for those of you that are watching and talking about Alexander Usyk or wondering my opinion, I do believe that Alexander Usyk is an all-time great level fighter. I just think that he has to be. Not only is he greatly skilled, but on top of that, when you talk about his accomplishments, the man is just phenomenal. So I think once again that if you're going to count certain fighters such as Evander Holyfield or Terrence Crawford or Canelo Alvarez as all-time greats, and I count all those fighters as all-time great level fighters, I think that you have to count Alexander Usyk in there as well. But yeah. But anyways, man, once again, we're going to be taking a look at the comments in my most recent video. Let's start off with the first one. And this man, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce this one, but he said they never gave Alexander Usyk his flowers as he's top 10 or 5 greatest heavyweight boxer of all time. Well, I agree that a certain amount of these guys, especially from the LDBC and new media, are not giving Alexander Usyk his proper flowers. But the reason why that is, once again, is because they're very racially motivated and they don't want a fighter like a Usyk to be remembered, debatably as the greatest of his generation. And on top of that, they don't want to muddy up the waters and possibly have Usyk replace all-time great level black fighters on the top 10 or top 20 pound for pound list. Now, I'm not quite sure if I would place Usyk on my top 10 greatest of all time list, but overall he would definitely be knocking on the door of the top 30 to top 20 of all time because if we have Crawford, excuse me, if we have Crawford and Canelo also in that same range, which I do as well, then we're gonna have to have Usyk in there as well. But anyways, let's see some of these replies here. Let's see. Um, and of course, I responded, I don't know if he'd be top 5 all time in heavyweight or not, but there could be an argument. And Casey Cook, of course, here he says he's not top 10 heavyweight. Well, actually, I personally disagree with that. When you talk about a top 10 all time great heavyweight, listen, Alexander Usyk, he completely unified the weight class. And not only that, but he beat all the big name guys that he pretty much needed to. I mean, unless we're pretty much, talking about Andrew Ruiz or Deontay Wilder or something like that. No, he didn't fight those guys, but the champions of the time when that heavyweight division, I still think was relatively talented. Now, you don't have to say that those guys are the most all-time greatly skilled fighters that you've ever seen, but those guys were still relatively talented. So this narrative of this heavyweight division being quote-unquote dead, I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. But yeah, he definitely would have to be a top 10 level heavyweight of all time. Not only did he completely unify the weight class, but the man is exceptionally skilled, and he was able to do something that not a lot of people were able to do. So that is, that's something that we have to talk about. John Sean Boxon says Usyk is the pound for pound king. I would agree right now. I think that he is the number one pound for pound level fighter. I would agree, and we're going to get into that as it goes along as well. Let's see. So let's see. Because he is not American and not promoted by Americans like Top Rank. Let's see. Um, Okay, this dude, Dantelane 2020, he says these dudes are super fans, so they neglected almost 150 years of boxing history for Usyk. They're bugging. Usyk hasn't even beaten Holyfield record in cruiser, which is why he's going back down. Well, I don't think Holyfield ever became completely undisputed for the cruiserweight division. I also don't think he ever became completely undisputed for the heavyweight division either, even though he came really close. Because I still think during those eras you had to have all four belts in order to be completely undisputed. In Holyfield, I think only won three belts per each division, which of course is great. But once again, that's why I'm saying that if Holyfield is considered an all-time great level fighter, and he lost a multitude of fights, and on top of that, if we're going to be honest, in certain times he probably had a little bit more holes in his game than what a Usyk did. Just take a look at some of his fights, like against Burt Cooper and Michael Moore. Then I think that Usyk should be counted as an all-time great as well. But let's see. Pernell isn't. This dude's talking about Pernell Whitaker. Pernell isn't heavyweight, and Usyk ain't better than Pernell or Tito. Was a three-weight world champion and beat 10 or more world champions. Besides that, defended his belt. Well, actually, I would say that Usyk is in the same class, if not above Tito. What was his name? Felix Tito Trinidad. I think that Felix Tito Trinidad is a great fighter, but I'm not really quite sure if he'd be within my top 10 or top 20 of all time. He probably would be at least within my top 50 fighters of all time. But in my view, you could debate Usyk above Tito. Tito did lose certain fights. Now, to be fair, that was more towards the end of his career, and when he was starting to get outsized, it's a little bit hard to judge him. But Usyk, in my view, is around that class. But let's see. Uh, let's see. All right, so this dude, he mentions this. Okay, so Um, this is okay. This is going to be interesting. So people keep mentioning these really older heavyweights, and I'm just going to be real with you. I cannot tell you, in my personal view, whether I think those guys deserve to be within the top 10 or not, because I don't know enough about the era. That's first of all. So people like Sam Langford and Archie Moore and those guys. Now I know a little bit about Archie Moore and Rocky Marciano and those guys, but when you talk about guys like Sam Langford and Jack Johnson and other guys like that, even Sugar Ray Robinson for his weight class, it's a little bit harder to talk about those guys. And the reason why that is because those guys, they could fight 10 fights in a row to where those fighters would be like 12 and 7 or 20 and 20 and 15. So that's just a completely different era. And that's why we have to rank that completely differently, because the standards of being a Hall of Famer back then or a great level boxer, it just might be completely different. That's why, a lot of people, like, they compare Chavez's or Sugar Ray Robinson's, record to Floyd's. But when you talk about Floyd Mayweather Jr. and the amount of champions that he fought, it's not comparable, because Floyd, once again, was not a part of that era to where you fought 20 times in 1 year, and 15 out of those 20 fights, could have been pretty much against bums. So once again, that's why I'm saying that it's a little bit hard to judge in that era. I'm not saying that some of these guys can't be on the list, but I would have to do a little bit more research, and that's also just a completely different era. So, but we'll get to that. But let's see. Show more replies. Um, it's taking a little bit to load. Hold on. Um, Usyk doesn't have time anymore. He has maximum 2 years left, which means 2 or 3 more fights. And Usyk is 37 years old. He's going to be 38 next month in January. So the interesting thing is, once again, is that if Usyk does somehow end up losing one of his next few fights, I wonder if they're also going to use the LDBC and new media. I wonder if they're going to be using the same excuse that they used with Terrence Bud Crawford, the fact that he did not look good in his last fight, because he's also 37 years old as well. Are we going to see that with Usyk? Let's wait and see. Now, I think that Usyk still is at a very good point in his career, because he hasn't really had that much wear and tear on him. But after these last two, after these two Fury fights, it might be a little bit different. So let's see. Let's see. Casey or J007 says if Usyk beats DDP, he is top 10. I'm not really sure who the hell that is. But yeah, anyways, let's see. Anyways, okay, so this guy's trying to make a point that Usyk is not once again a top 10 heavyweight of all time. Do I personally agree with that? Once again, no, I do not. Once again, the man is completely unified. He beat the best heavyweights of his day, and he beat them clearly. And he did something that that pretty much was not supposed to be possible. He beat two men that were bigger than him by about 20 plus pounds in Fury and AJ Anthony Joshua, and guys that were relatively talented. So, once again, but anyways, I'm going to skip past this little part of the comment section because it's just too much to respond to here. So let's get past this. Anyway, so here, Baron Avola, 123, he says Usyk is a phenom. He beat the number one and two heavies in 5 fights 4 times to become number one. Ward never did that. I somewhat agree. Ali never did that. Mayweather never did that. In 3 fights, he became champ at heavy. In 6 fights, became undisputed at heavy. Usyk tore up the best cruiser division of all time to become undisputed. Number one pound for pound. One more thing not to be underestimated. He did it all on the road. I would pretty much agree with the majority of what Mr. Baran Avola 123 said there. Now, in terms of the best cruiserweight division of all time, to be honest, I wouldn't have enough information to really tell you that. But I do say this: like people try to act like that cruiserweight division was just filled with bums. No, that was a relatively talented cruiserweight division. It was very similar almost to when Andre SOG Ward, and Andre is a very important factor in this conversation, by the way. And the reason why that is because people are now also trying to make the argument that, well, Usyk, he had to fight lesser competition. There was no elite Black American fighters in his weight class. And I mean, that might be true, other than maybe Michael Hunter. But if we're also going to hold that standard, then what that means is that we can't be calling Andre SOG Ward an all-time great level fighter anymore. What that also means is that we can't compare Floyd Mayweather to guys like Sugar Ray Leonard, who beat multiple all-time great black level fighters within his weight classes, like Tommy Hearns and what's his name, Marvin Marvelous Hagler. Because Floyd Mayweather Jr. really only beat one all-time great black fighter, and that was Sugar Shane Mosley. And to be quite honest with you, Sugar Shane Mosley has a little bit of overrated boxing ability. That's why he lost a lot of his bigger fights. So that's one thing I want to say. But but that cruiserweight division was very talented. Once again, you had an undefeated Polish fighter in Glowacki that knew how to box and was very decent. You had Murat Gassiev, who had a super fight against the Cuban fighter Junior Dorticos, I believe. So that he knocked him out, I believe, in either the second to last round or the last round. That was a big fight at the time, and Murat Gassiev pulled out. Of course, the undefeated Maris Bredas, Michael Hunter as well. Usyk ran through all those guys. He went through all of them. That was very comparable to when at 140 pounds, Josh Taylor had to go through the 140-pound weight class, and there were some really good undefeated fighters there, like Jose Ramirez and Regis Prograis and some other guys like that. Not saying that all those guys are first ballot Hall of Famers or anything like that, but it was a very talented weight class. I think that undisputed run was definitely better than, say, when Terrence Bud Crawford unified 140. When he ended up getting a vacated belt against Thomas Delorme, and then later on he beat Julius Ndongo, who I think is maybe a B grade level fighter at best, but in all honesty, nothing more. And then of course Victor Polstal, which is one of the bigger ones in his career. But once again, I just don't think that 140-pound run was extremely strong. Now I still give Crawford credit, but if you're asking me to compare, I would say that Usyk's run at 200 pounds at cruiserweight was probably stronger than Crawford's run at 140. Just my personal view of it. But once again, to bring up Andre SOG Ward, the interesting thing about that, and the reason why Andre Ward is so important to this conversation, is because once again, a certain amount of people are saying, well, Usyk, he can't really be counted as great because there's not as many great Black American fighters within the heavyweight division. And I mean, once again, if you want to go by that narrative, I would somewhat understand. But then just don't be counting Andre SOG Ward as an all-time great level fighter then. Because literally all the big ones in his career, they're all over Europeans. Mikhail Kessler, Carl Frosch, Sergey the Crusher Kovalev, Arthur Abraham. Now, of course, he has that win over Chad Dawson, but to be fair, he did have to bring him down in weight. So once again, if we're going to be making these standards, then stop calling Andre SOG Ward a great. Stop calling Floyd Mayweather Jr. the greatest of all time, because the best fighters that Floyd Mayweather Jr. ever defeated, they were not Black American fighters. Not usually. The only two that would really stand out would be Zab Judah, who pretty much proved himself to be a fighter that would always lose against the supreme talents, and Sugar Shane Mosley, who also a lot of the times would lose against more of the supreme level talents. So once again, that means that Mayweather cannot be in the GOAT conversation if you're going by that narrative. And on top of that, once again, don't call Andreas Ward an all-time great level fighter if you're going to go by those standards. But anyway, okay. So let's see. Um, I want to see some of the replies to this really quickly. Um, So this dude replies, Ali never did that. What are you yapping about? You don't need to put down an all-time great heavyweight legend, Naglaze Usyk. Well, I'm not really quite sure if he's trying to put down Ali or if he's just comparing to him. Now, in terms of the Usyk versus Ali conversation, I'm not quite sure if I would put Usyk above Ali because I think Ali just has quite the tremendous resume for heavyweight. He beat Sonny Liston and George Foreman and Floyd Patterson and Joe Frazier and a couple of other guys that I can probably remember. But I mean, Usyk once again, he's knocking on the door of a lot of those guys, at least of the top 30 and top 20 of all time, in my view. Once again, if you have Crawford as an all-time great level fighter, which in my view he is, Usyk definitely belongs there. Because Usyk, to be quite honest with you, probably had stronger levels of competition, at least debatably, with both of his undisputed runs. And some people may not agree with that, but that's just my view of it, and I can explain that a little bit later as to why I believe that. But anyways, okay. And damn, I have a lot of comments that I'm gonna have to respond to. So let's say CJ Rich says this channel is racially biased while calling out other channels for the same thing. Well, I would need to know exactly why you say that, man. But if you want to, put down an explanation, I have no problem responding to your comment, man. But I would have to know why you say that and why you truly believe that. But anyway, so let's see. And once again, this dude's going on about the top 10 heavyweights of all time and Sam Langford and all those guys. Great fighters, but once again, that was a completely different era where you could fight fighters, many times per year to where a lot of those guys really were not championship level caliber. So, you know, anyway. Um, the fact okay, this dude Darren, who actually commented quite a bit in this video, he said the fact you need to name Ali underscores your point. Ali, who incidentally is Usyk's hero, and who he places at number one, and that's great. That being stated, what I will say about Muhammad Ali is that he's going to be very hard to overcome for any particular fighter, whether we talk about Mayweather or Pacquiao or Roy Jones Jr. or anything like that. And the man is an all-time great. You could debate him as the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time, but if we're talking about Ali, the man was not flawless. At the end of the day, he gets credited for being one of the greater defensive fighters of all time. But to be quite honest with you, what he really should get credited for is being one of the greater athletes of all time. And he was a great defensive fighter in terms of his reflexes and in terms of not getting hit. But in terms of actually keeping his hands up as well as what he should have, a lot of the times he didn't actually do that. And that's why you see in the Joe Frazier fights, he got hit so much because he got hit with that left hook and he got dropped on his ass in one of those latter rounds in the first fight by left hook because Ali, a lot of the times, would not keep his damn hands up. He wouldn't keep his right hand up very well. That's why he was a sucker for a left hook. Now, if we compare him to Usyk, for example, Usyk also has his faults. Like he's not always the strongest at defending to the body, and there are certain shots that he could defeat. But in terms of the narrative of certain fighters just not comparing to Ali or any of these other past heavyweights at all, do I agree with that? No, personally, I don't. I think that every generation has their greats, and I think that those guys could have been competitive in any era, at least more than likely. But anyway, so let's see. Um, okay, let's see. This dude replied, "How many Hall of Famers beat Ali and others?" Okay, so let's go down. Um, let's see. Okay, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, Larry Holmes, all three Hall of Famers. Leon Spinks and Trevor. Okay, so this guy's I mean, if that guy's trying to make the point of, Ali lost to those guys, to be fair, he was pretty much done at that point, except with Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, of course. But anyway, let's see. Yeah, and Darren replied, all two out of three losses came back at the end of his career when he was way past his best and middle of Parkinson's. Well, what I will say is this, is that Muhammad Ali, a lot of people really thought that he should have lost two out of the three fights against Ken Norton. And to be fair, he did lose against Ken Norton one time. And I would not really claim that Ken Norton is an all-time great level fighter. So, certain people, they keep trying to do this narrative about, well, Usyk or some of these other guys, they can't be an all-time great fighter. They don't compare to Ali whatsoever because of this, and that. But once again, what you'll find even with the all-time greats is that their record is not flawless. Once again, Muhammad Ali lost to Joe Frazier. He had a hell of a time against Ken Norton and ended up losing one time to Ken Norton. And Ken Norton was not a champion before he beat Muhammad Ali. And when he got older, he did lose to Leon Spinks, someone that I believe was about 8-0, and someone that, to be quite honest with you, was not really an amazing boxer. So if we are comparing career, even though Ali, I think, is up there in my top 10 of all time, his career is not flawless. So once again, when we take a look at some of these boxers, whether it be Mayweather or Ali or Pacquiao or Marciano, whoever it may be, more than likely you're going to find flaws within all of them, and that's fine. But once again, I'm just not. I don't like it when people try to do this shit about, well, these current age fighters can't even compare to the older ones. Well, of course they could. All time greats could probably be great in any era. Doesn't mean that they would just beat everybody. But Usyk is one of those guys. He's a guy that could be competitive in any era, in my particular view. But anyway, okay. So let's see. Uh, CJ Rich says, let's see here. We can't judge Usyk until his career is over. Just enjoy the moment. Well, actually, no, sir. We can judge his career because Alexander Usyk has completed a lot of things. And I mean, if we're going to go by that narrative once again, then we need to talk about Terrence Bud Crawford. Then we need to talk about Crawford and other fighters like that and say, okay, well, we can't call Terrence Bud Crawford an all-time great yet because we need to see until his career is over. And I mean, no offense, maybe you mean well, but most of the time when a lot of people use that narrative, it's because they're more than likely trying to diminish a certain athlete's accomplishments, or they don't want them compared in that same category. But anyway, let's see. Uh, so this person actually responds. I think we should wait 15 years. AJ Fury Dubois may become Hall of Famers. AJ and Fury are definitely going to be Hall of Famers. Even Marco Huck, he won 14 champs fights. So Usyk can have at least 6-0 against Hall of Famers, but we must only wait. Well, I'm actually glad that the man brought up that conversation. And the reason why that is because whenever it comes to the Hall of Famer conversation, you're not always going to know which certain fighters may be a Hall of Famer, especially in that cruiserweight division. It's going to be tough because Usyk came around when fighters were just getting started up. And after that loss, they may not be quite the same fighter ever again, or you may not really hear of them again after that. But all those fighters are relatively talented. Like when you take a look at Josh Taylor when he unified 140, we could use the narrative about, oh, well, Josh Taylor, he didn't beat any Hall of Famers, right? But his undisputed run was not easy. That was a very talented weight class. You had the undefeated Jose Ramirez, and you had Victor Postolster running around that weight division when he still had a little bit of goodness left. You had Regis Prograis and Josh Taylor ran through all those guys, but we can sit here and say, oh, well, Jose Ramirez and Regis Prograis, they're not Hall of Famers, right? But that doesn't mean that, that the undisputed run was not a strong undisputed run, so we have to be careful with that, man. But anyway, sorry, man, I'm like losing my voice over here. Hopefully I can continue, but anyway, um, but let's see. Um, so, mm, okay, let me see. Okay, so we're just gonna move on to the next one, and then we're going to talk about some other ones, and then I'm gonna respond to some of your comments. So this person says 7 fights in heavyweight, and he's undisputed 12 title fights and 23 fights. How many have done that? And I agree with you. Once again, now certain people will say that he's not top 10 or not top 20 for heavyweight of all time. I don't know really how you can dispute that because once again. The man beat every great heavyweight of his era, pretty much, and he became completely undisputed. And once again, people are trying to make the conversation that the heavyweight division was dead. No, it was not dead. But we're going to be talking about that as it goes along as well. Anyway, let's see here. Um, okay. What's up, man? Glad to catch your live stream. Yeah, man. Good to see you too. It's just my voice, man. It's um, shit, man. My voice is like fucking kill me right now, man. I'm sorry about that. CJ Rich says, I'm a new subscriber. Do you drop the StreamYard link to have a conversation in real time? Yeah, sometimes I do, man. The problem is that StreamYard recently just changed a lot of their stuff, so I'm actually not able to put like a background on this right now. So I think I can still invite you to the stream. I'll invite you to the stream if you want after a couple more comments that I'm reading. If my if my voice will allow it. And then yeah, man, we'll see what can happen. But yeah, I don't mind. But I'd love to invite you. But yeah, I don't know because StreamYard has now changed their price. So with that, they changed my package without me even completely knowing it. So I can't even put certain banners on right now. That's why I have no background other than my emblem. But we'll see what happens with that. But I'll try to invite you all to the stream or some people one at a time. But yeah, okay. So all right, man. Yeah, thank y'all for understanding. So let's see. Once I figured out Aki was a racist on, so I've never looked back as for other racist boxing channels. Yeah, Aki TV. And I think, honestly, that the LDBC and the media, I think that there's somewhat of a necessary evil because I do think that there are a lot of double standards against black fighters. And I think that they kind of keep people in check, but at the same time, they also keep people a little bit sharp for people that actually have a good boxing brain because they do spread a lot of bullshit and they are going to keep people in check for people that actually know the true facts of boxing. But anyway, let's see. Um, so this dude, Danny Enati, he says another fun fact: Usyk beat Gassiev on the back foot, aka pure boxing style. Usyk fought AJ mid range, aka boxer puncher style. Then again, against the biggest, fattest of them all, Fury, Usyk beat him as a pure pressure fighter. Usyk can fight back mid range and stay in the pocket. Usyk, from what I see, he can pretty much fight in almost any type of way that he wants to. Now, some people, of course, criticize Usyk and say that more than likely he cannot fight on the back foot. And what people have also been trying to do is that they've been trying to completely compare him to Lomachenko. And there's a lot of similarities, but Usyk proved that he was greater than Lomachenko at the end of the day because he was able to do something that Lomachenko was not able to do. If Lomachenko was on the Usyk level, he would have beat Teofimo Lopez, and he also would have beat Devin Haney, at least the way that Usyk was able to beat Fury. Because in my view, Fury probably was debatably at one point in time top 5 pound for pound. I'm not sure if Teofimo Lopez really ever was. Devin Haney maybe debatably, but yeah, it is what it is. So once again, this narrative of the heavyweight division being dead, I can't buy into that. But anyways, let's see here. Um, but yeah, um, so let's see. I'm gonna try. CJ Rich, if you're still watching the stream, man, I'm gonna try to get you into the live stream. But man, I gotta remember how to even do this. Okay, so let me see here. Invite guests to the studio. Okay, I'm gonna try to do this. Um, I will see if this works. If it don't work, then I'll have to try to find another way. And by the way, once again, man, my voice is is not the best right now, so I'm gonna try to talk as long as I can. But anyway, all right. So there's a link, CJ. If you want to join, feel free, man. Oh man, does this thing just freeze on me? It may have just froze on me. Hold on. Jesus. Yep. Come on, computer. All right. I think it's going to be working here in about a second. It's just computer's been super laggy today. I don't know why. You're almost right, boxing realist, but Tyson Fury was never okay. CJ is actually here. All right, so I'm adding to the stage. All right, what's up, my man? CJ, you there?
Yeah, what's going on, man? I just
Yeah,
came
what's going
across your
on?
channel. Just came across your channel this past week. I hope you had a good Christmas, and all that.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Um, Sorry to hear that you're starting to get sick, man. Take care of yourself, health as
Yeah,
well.
it's all good, man. Just my voice gets dead sometimes. I'm all good, but thanks. But yeah, man, feel free to say whatever you want in terms of a debate, and after that, I'll get some other people in here too, one at a time. But yeah, Doug, thank you for tuning in, and feel free to talk and bring up any points you want.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate you letting me on your platform. But really all I gotta say, I don't have any double standards. I don't put Crawford as an all-time great yet, just like I don't put Usyk. So it's not a matter of different rules. I just like to see how fighters' careers play out before I
Yeah,
say, okay, well, he belongs here or he belongs there.
no, I
Like
got you.
like someone brought up, Ali, most of his what diminished, I wouldn't say diminished, but that asterisk on his legacy was he stuck around too long.
Yeah.
We didn't know then about CTE and suffering from mental health problems,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
really hits close to home. I won't go too deep into it, but going through something like that with me and my family.
Oh
But
yeah, sorry to hear about that, man.
I appreciate it. But yeah, if he had just retired after Rumble in the Jungle, then he would be undebatedly the greatest, right?
Yeah.
But now we have some room for conversation. So that's all I'm saying. I try to be fair. Um, let me say this though. I
Mhm.
think I came across you a couple days ago. You were talking about Dante's Boxing Nation, the video he had put up about Usyk. Is that right?
Y Yep,
Was
yep.
that you? Okay. Okay, because I
Yeah.
watch a lot of boxing channels. I get on a lot of panels, so just making sure I had my facts correct.
No, you're all good,
Okay.
man.
Um, Personally, I still do, even if he's not as active. But just what I've seen in the ring, the very subjective eye test.
Mhm.
That's why I put Crawford slightly over Usyk. Just more impressive physically and all the different diverse things he can do.
No, I got you,
Switching
man.
southpaw, the power. Uh, I'd say they're on the same level, footwork wise, and judging distance and all that. But yeah,
Yeah.
just based on the eye test, Crawford slightly ahead. I do wish he would fight more, but I understand both of these fighters are getting older, close to my age. Their careers are winding down, so I'm not going to judge him, especially after he said. And we don't know how valid this is. We're only fans. I don't know if you have any industry connections. I'll tell you, full stop. I don't. So I
Mhm.
just consume
No,
the
yeah. No,
media.
I don't.
Okay, because I know some of these boxing channels do, but yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna assume that it's valid that he really has an injury, and also that he's holding out for that Canelo fight. He managed to raise his profile to the level where that's somewhat realistic.
Yeah.
And again, who else is Canelo going to fight at 168? He already ran through all the cherry picks, in my opinion.
Mhm. No,
And
I understand.
again, being fair, I give Tank Davis the same heat. So I don't really, base my boxing opinions based off race, man. I've been watching this since the late '80s.
No, you're
I'm
all good.
40. I'm 40 years old now, so I've been watching this since Tyson's heyday. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's just the opening statement that I wanted to get off. And yeah, you can give me your opinion, your response to that.
Yeah, sure, dog. No problem. Yeah. So, in terms of the all-time great conversation, a lot of people, and I see Hollow Ninja. He wants to possibly join the live stream. I'll put you on after this little conversation, Mr. Hollow Ninja. But anyways, so in terms of the all-time great conversation, I count certain fighters that accomplish a certain amount, and on top of that, win their biggest fights as all-time greats. Depending on who it is. If you're talking about maybe a fighter like a Gennady Golovkin who had a certain amount of title defenses, but he only has two big wins against, say, Danny Jacobs or Lemieux and the draw against Canelo. I can maybe understand him not being in the all-time great conversation, but I think the three fighters that should be in the all-time great conversation, at least of this era, I think you got to include Canelo, who has, in my view, almost a dozen eight grade level wins on his record. I think you got to include Usyk, and I think you got to include Crawford. Not just the belts that they won, but also the resumes that they have. Oh God, man, and yeah, my voice is starting to go again. But
No worries.
but yeah, the thing that I also will mention, and a part of the reason why I like to review Aki TV and Dante's Boxing Nation, and old media tends to do this as well, where they like to say this stuff about, oh well, Mayweather can't compare to these older fighters because he didn't have this and this, but then when it comes to say non-black fighters, then all of a sudden they'll put them on a higher level and they won't compare them similarly. Well, new
Mhm.
media does the same thing, at least Aki TV and Dante, just with different fighters. So what you'll notice is that Dante and Aki TV, even though Terrence, in my view, doesn't have the most expensive resume, they'll say, oh well, he's undisputedly not even a debate top five, top 10 of all time. But then in my view, you have Canelo and Usyk who have either, I mean, to be honest with you, in my personal opinion, if not better resumes, then I mean, at least on the same level. At least with Usyk, it's like, well, I don't understand how you would have Crawford immediately top 5 or top 10 all time because Usyk and Canelo, in my personal view, they're on the same level. And in terms of Crawford being number one, I can't blame you for that. I think the two fighters right now that have the best debate would be Usyk and Crawford. In a way, I think is slightly behind them, but I don't think that he has quite the resume yet. And Canelo, he's been going out as a fighter, and the level of competition has not been as up to par as of late. So I would kind of agree with you a little bit there. Usyk would be my number one, just because I think the Fury win is so impactful. But I mean, I don't really have a problem with Crawford being number one. I just think this narrative of him being miles ahead of everybody, I don't personally see that myself because I don't think his resume is super stacked on top of that, and I think that Usyk and Canelo are very comparable for this era. So that's a part of the reason why I do what I do on this channel. But I understand a lot of the points that you're making, though.
Okay, that's valid. Check this out. I
Hmm.
definitely appreciate what Usyk did because he waited 25 damn years
Oh yeah,
to have an undisputed heavyweight champion.
oh
And
yeah,
that's something that's obviously the marquee division
oh
in
yeah,
boxing. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that, man. I was very excited. I was going for him. I thought he might get jobbed out on the cards in the first fight, but he pulled it off. The Riyadh
yeah. He
season,
did.
for the by and large, except for that job on the undercard, Riyadh season seems to have solid judges. So a shout out to
Yeah,
them for so
yeah. I'll give them that.
that's good.
I mean, the first time they gave Fury kind of a split. One of the cards gave him, one of the scores, but
Yeah,
I think that it was relatively fair scoring. So yeah, I'll give it to him. So yeah, I thought Usyk won both fights relatively clearly. And once again, with the size advantage and also the boxing ability that Fury has, I mean, it's pretty impressive what Usyk was able to do. So yeah, I would mainly agree with you.
I agree. I agree. Let me say this: as far as resume wise, I think people really underestimate what Crawford accomplished, specifically at welterweight. That I
Gotcha.
don't know, 7 year knockout streak, winning all his fights by knockout at welterweight. That's super impressive. Stoppage. He didn't leave it any room for ambiguity and nothing on the cards. And he is
Yeah.
also went undisputed in 2 divisions and now a 4 division champion. So based on those accolades, and people, what are they overlook Porter, Amir Khan, obviously the Earl Spence was very impactful. So I do think the resumes are comparable, but just give the
Hmm.
slight edge to Crawford because I don't think that he fought Joshua or Fury at their best. And again, let me say this, and then I'll let you respond,
Hmm.
and I might step down. You
Sure.
can't control who is in your division or what stage they're at in their career when you fight them. You just get in there and do your best against the opponent that's placed in front of you. So it's
Yeah.
not like Crawford made Spence have an accident. It's
Yeah.
not like Usyk made Fury, fall off for a few years and get depressed and addicted
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
substances. So it is what it is. So yeah, I would agree
Yeah.
that they're comparable. Comparable.
I got you. I got you. I'm gonna tell you this because that's actually an interesting comparison. So when I take a look at Crawford's resume, I always say this in my videos, I give him about 5 A grade level wins in his career. I give him Gamboa, I give him Postal, I give him Porter, I give him Spence, and possibly Madrimov as well. Now, when we talk about possibly fighting fighters not at their absolute peak or best. When we talk about things that actually hold weight, I would say that, for example, when Canelo Alvarez, when he fought, say, um, like Sugar Shane Mosley, I don't really count that win as an A grade level win because that was when Mosley was pretty much done. Now, when he fought
Mhm.
Sergey the Crusher Kovalev, I still do count it as an A grade level win because he was still a champion and he was coming off 2 dominant wins over 2 top contenders. However, when you talk about Crawford, for example, beating, say, Kell Brook and Khan, I mean, some people count them bigger, some people don't. I don't personally count them as big wins because by the time that Crawford beat them, I don't think they really had much soul left. Maybe Khan, maybe, but Brook I thought was done because those guys have been stopped multiple times. I don't think Khan was ever personally the same after he got knocked out by Canelo, and I don't think Brook was ever the same after he got knocked out by Spence. Just my personal view of it. Now, Fury, the interesting thing about him, I think that Joshua probably was around his best when Usyk fought him. Fury is a little bit interesting because he was showing a little bit of signs of slippage, but it's hard to tell if he suffered damage from the Wilder fights or if maybe he just took Ngannou too lightly. So, but what I would state is that because also a lot of people use this with Spence and Crawford as well. Spence, of course, was coming off of a 14-month layoff, I believe. And of course, a lot of people used it well. He was in car accidents. But the reason why that excuse don't fly with me that much is because before then, and he was already in multiple car accidents before the Ugas fight, Spence pretty much tore Ugas up. And that was when Ugas was looked at as a decently dangerous fighter. So I take a look at Fury and Joshua and Spence and Porter. I believe that those fighters are all at a decent point in their career. Now, if Usyk was fighting someone right now like a Joe Joyce, then I would say it's a bit different because he might still be one of the top 10 guys at heavyweight, but he's not really an elite contender because of how he's looked as of recent. But once again, it depends on how you look at things. But I think Crawford's knockout streak at welterweight is relatively impressive. But what I also look at is that I don't think that Aegis Kavaliauskas was an A-grade level fighter. I don't think Jose Benavidez ever was. I don't think that, personally, in my view, I don't know if Jeff Horn ever was, but I do give him credit for Spence and Porter. But just in my personal view, I think that you can make a debate that Usyk's cruiserweight runs and heavyweight runs were stronger, possibly than even either of the runs that Crawford had as his undisputed runs. But I mean, that of course would be debatable. It depends on what you look at. But I understand some of the points you're making.
Okay, fair enough. I do think I will say, with regards to Canelo, that I think that the Crusher was not the Crusher when he beat him.
Yeah,
First,
I
he had just
agree.
came off a super tough fight, and then it was like, if I'm not mistaken, 3 months. 3 months
Mhm.
down the line, he had to, obviously Canelo's a tough matchup, and
Yeah.
maybe full disclosure, maybe a bit biased because I just don't like. I respect what Canelo did early on, taking on all
Mhm.
the toughest challengers, but what he's done lately has really tainted my view on him. So maybe I am being biased there, but yeah,
I
like I
gotcha.
said, Kovalev coming off a very tough fight, and then 3 months later, Canelo. Maybe he should have taken a little more time, but yeah, payday. He want payday, right?
Nah,
Um,
I got you. Yeah, man, I
so,
got you.
man, that's all I got to say for today, man. Thanks for having me on.
No, man, it's cool. It's cool. We're gonna get Hollow Ninja in here now, but yeah, thank you to CJ for coming on the live, and yeah, man, no problem at all. Always glad to hear from you. But yeah, man. All right, cool. All right, we're gonna get Hollow Ninja in here now, and let's see what he has to say. All
Yeah,
right,
what's up,
Hollow, you
man?
should be on the live. Let me know when you're ready to talk, man. What's up,
Yeah,
dog?
how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
Oh, good, good, man. Yeah, I think that yeah, Usyk is an all-time great, and I am a huge Terrence Crawford fan. One of my favorite fighters of all time. I think it's like when people say that Terrence Crawford is the greatest of all time, right? We don't really
Mhm.
mean that like we don't really mean it like resume wise, but it's just like because of
Yeah,
his skill, his ability, Because I
yeah,
mean,
for
like
sure.
if you put Terrence Crawford next to any fighter, if he can adapt to their weight, he crushes them.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So it's like, and in terms of Terrence Crawford's resume, he has an amazing resume. I don't know why people always like to downplay it, look it down. It's just that some people choose not to, study the fighters that he fought. Like Kell Brook was fine when Terrence Crawford fought him because Kell Brook came off with a 4-fight win streak before he fought Terrence
Um,
Crawford.
Well,
Yeah.
what I'll tell you is this, because that's actually a point that I would not agree with. And the reason why I do not agree with that is because Kell Brook, I think that you can debate that he was still dangerous for maybe, average level fighters for those weight classes. But I think that in terms of championship level aspiration, he was never going to get there again. And that's why when it came to Kell Brook, I think he was too damaged after the Errol Spence fight. He still had a little bit left in him, I think, after the Golovkin fight. But after Errol Spence, I thought he was completely done. I thought Amir Khan also was somewhat done after the Canelo fight. He also was never quite the same after that. But I mean, like I said, there's certain fighters that when they get knocked out or when they get beaten, they still have a little bit left or championship level, like Kovalev, for example, when he fought Canelo. He was not the same top 5 pound for pound guy anymore, clearly, but he still had a little bit left in him because he was still beating top 10 guys in that weight class. I'm not quite sure if Kell Brook at that time would have ever been really championship level aspirations again. And that to me is what the real question is in terms of how big of a win is it. Now, when Crawford fought Postal, he of course was a champion. When he fought Gamboa, of course he had a year layoff, but still championship level potential. When he fought Madrimov and when he fought Porter, I mean Porter was not a champion anymore, but he still gave Crawford a hell of a fight. So I still count that as a championship level fight. And Spence, of course, but Kell Brook and Khan, I do not personally count those as big A grade level wins, in my view. I just thought they were too damaged at that time.
I mean, Amir Khan, I guess, I would give him a little bit of credit for it, but Kell Brook, I would give him credit for it because the thing is that Kell Brook, what people don't understand is that Kell Brook actually had a good performance in that fight, right? Until he got caught. He
Yeah.
got caught with a good shot because because Kell Brook in that fight swelled up Terrence Crawford's eye. He swelled up his eye.
He definitely
So,
did.
When people try to downplay it, I'm like, I think it's because he made him look easy. Terrence Crawford just caught him with a very sneaky shot. He threw a jab over the jab. And that's not easy to do, So that's why I give Terrence Crawford credit for it. And also, we have to look back, right? Keith Thurman and Errol Spence. Because remember, Terrence Crawford came up and called him out, right? Keith Thurman and Errol Spence said, Keith Thurman specifically said, oh, go fight Amir Khan. Go fight Kell Brook.
Yeah.
That's why he fought him. Errol Spence said, go fight Kell Brook. They said, go get a belt. Go do this. Go do that. And also, we have to give Crawford credit for Jeff Horn. I mean, Jeff Horn came off win. Yeah. There's another one. Britis Prescott gave Amir Khan his first loss, remember?
He did.
Crushed it. Yeah, and then what did Terrence do to Britis Prescott? That's a legitimate win.
What I'll tell you is this, because I don't personally, just in my view, I don't consider Britis Prescott an A grade level win. Now, Britis Prescott was a dude that was dangerous in the early part of his career, and I think that he knocked out Khan when he was a little bit more inexperienced, and on top of that, it was just a really bad matchup. I think Britis Prescott is a dude that probably at his absolute best maybe is a B grade level fighter, just in my view. Because I've other than Khan, I've never seen him really beat anyone worthwhile. And when you talk about some of the other wins, I mean, like I said, I consider Crawford really about having only 5 A grade level wins. I think that Britis Prescott once again was decent, a great win on the come up. Like there are certain fighters that you fight within your first 10 to 20 fights that they're somewhat dangerous for that level, but once you really get to the elites, they're not going to last long there. And that, in my view, is the fighter that Britis Prescott was.
Solid win. Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I like that take. I understand. Yeah. So and also Ndongo. I mean, Ndongo was the unified champion. He beat Travanovsky, and then he beat Ricky Burns, who was the 3-division champion. Yeah.
I personally do not consider Julius Ndongo an A-grade level fighter because I did not consider Troyanowski or Ricky Burns, who was a bit older at the time. I don't really consider any of those guys A-grade level fighters in my view. But, of course, Crawford does deserve credit for that. He ran through those guys. But, like I said, it depends on who you count as an A-grade level fighter. And just in my personal view, if we're comparing Usyk to Crawford, I would probably say that the majority of the cruiserweights that Usyk fought were more talented than the average fighters that Crawford fought at 140, just in my personal view, with the exception of Victor Postol. But I would probably say that the best cruiserweights that Usyk fought there probably would be comparable to Postol because I never considered Postol an elite level fighter. I think at his best, maybe he was about A-, but I never considered him this super elite level fighter. I still think it's impressive what Crawford did. I just don't think that the resume or that the division was stacked when he unified there. I think that, once again, the Julius Ndongo was a solid B-grade level win at the time. I think that Victor Postol, that, he was an A- level win. He knocked out Matisse. But other than that, I'm not really quite sure how much other A-grade level wins I can really give him.
No, I mean, come on, Bob. But Ricky Burns was when Terrence Crawford beat Ricky Burns, right? Ricky Burns was a 2-division world champion. And Ndongo beat Ricky Burns as a 3-division world champion. So, I mean, it's like I have to give Crawford credit for the fight. I mean, that's a legitimate win. You beat the unified champion. Because if I can't give Ndongo credit, if I can't give Bud credit for beating Ndongo like that, I can't give a no way credit for beating Marlon Tapales or Playboy.
I think that you might be able to debate that Marlon Tapales, in my view, was possibly more talented than Ricky Burns, but I mean that's not the worst take. Because Marlon Tapales, it's not like he's a complete flawless fighter. What I will say is that he beat an undefeated Uzbekistani fighter in MJ, who's relatively talented in order to beat anyway. But I mean that's not the worst point. But Ricky Burns, in my view, I don't know if I ever would have ranked him as an A-grade level fighter. But of course, when you're talking about Tapales versus anyway, that's that's a very good point as well. It's really a debate if Tapales is an A-grade level fighter. So that's definitely not your worst point. But I would say that there could be a debate to where Tapales maybe in terms of talent maybe could have been over Burns, but it's debatable because I don't think that either of them are super elite level fighters. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's just like with Terrence Crawford, like, and another argument that I usually make, right, is like, if these guys on Terrence Crawford's resume are, if they're all bums, why did a majority of them do better than Spence? I'm sorry, Spence should have done better than a majority of these guys, but he didn't.
Yeah.
The bum, the Mean Machine, John Molina, Felix Hank Lundy, all these guys all did better than Spence. That's why I'm like,
hmm
is Crawford really fighting bums, or is he just too damn good?
Well, you bring up a very interesting point there. That's a point that a certain amount of people would use, but I'll bring up this. And um, I think that, for example, Jose Benavidez and Aegis Kavalaskas, they have relative talent, but I just don't think they're great fighters. And certain people, of course, will bring up this point overall. This is the same point that a lot of Mayweather fans brought up when Pacquiao fought Mayweather. So Pacquiao, when you talk about the fighters that Mayweather beat, Pacquiao, in my view, is clearly the greatest that Mayweather has ever beat. But Maidana gave him a tougher fight. Cotto gave him a tougher fight. Oscar De La Hoya gave him a tougher fight. Jose Luis Castillo in 2 fights gave him a tougher fight. So it really can depend on the styles. Styles make matchups. And just because this fighter that's looked at as top 10 pound for pound doesn't give this fighter a greater matchup, that could be because of a multitude of factors. That could be because, they take this fighter more seriously. And on top of that, it could be the styles. So, for example, when you take a look at Crawford against Aegis Kavalaskas, I never considered Aegis an A grade level fighter. I think that he's decently talented, but not great. I think Crawford heavily underestimated him. And I think that once he really started to turn it up, that he really just eventually got the best of Aegis. So I think that that's something that also needs to be looked at because styles make fights. And on top of that, we need to take a look at how seriously also that fighter takes them and also one point in time in their career. So I understand your point. But in my personal view, that can be countered a little bit with certain different points.
No, but I mean, at the same time, it's just like I can't go on I can't look at another guy's resume, right, and just say, oh, he's only fought bums, and then fast forward to the future when you actually fight the guy, and then the bums did better than the guy who actually like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like
I know what you mean.
Crawford has actually probably been fighting the best the whole time then, and
I mean,
Spence, and also another thing before the before the Spence fight, right? What was it? It's like Crawford's never fought anybody. He's never done this. He's never done that. He went in there and destroyed Spence, delivered the greatest championship, ass whooping ever.
he probably
And now,
did, yeah.
yeah, and now Spence was not the same. Now Spence was not this. It's just a lot of boxing fans. They just keep moving the goalposts. A fighter cannot be proven to be great if people just keep moving the goalposts
I
over.
agree. And a lot of people do that in order for them not to ever achieve a level. I do agree with you. I cannot I'm not going to completely agree with your point once again about Aegis Kavalaskas or some of those guys being greater than what at least I would let them on, but I do understand your point. I think that if you're one of these guys that said that Spence was one of the top 5 pound for pound fighters still, or that he was possibly going to beat Crawford, like Boxing Ego, for example, that's a channel that I review. And Boxing Ego he's been on Crawford's ass for a very long time now. So the thing that I didn't like that Ego would especially do with Crawford is that he favored Spence to win the fight going into it, especially because of the Ugas fight that he recently did. But then afterwards, all of a sudden, all these car accidents matter and all this other stuff. And sometimes you can take a look at a fighter and they're just not the same. Did I believe that was Spence? No. I think that he was relatively the same. And I just think that he was completely the wrong type of style. And that's why, once again, I give Crawford all the credit in the world for Spence and Porter and Postal and Gamboa. But for some of the other ones, I just don't see them as A-grade level wins. But Spence and Porter, especially at the welterweight division, yes, for sure. I think those fights are A-grade level wins.
Right. Right. So I mean, yeah, it's just like, yeah, I mean, you know your stuff. You know your stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
think that I think that Bud's resume is pretty much on par with Usyk's and always.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's like if I had to make the Mount Rushmore of boxing right now, it would be let me see, Bud, of course, it'll be Usyk, of course, Inoue and Canelo, right? Those are the top four.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And it's just like I don't understand how people can say that Terrence Crawford is overrated. I mean, like, just watch the man fight.
Yeah.
And two, like he's Terrence Crawford has done it all. He's pretty much done it all. But the only thing he's never done really is fight a Hall of Famer, right? But now he's going after Canelo, and people are trashing him for
Yeah.
it. Like
Well,
that doesn't
that's
even.
also something else I want to talk about because a lot of people use this quote unquote Hall of Famer argument, and that's a dangerous argument because not every fighter that you fight that was looked at as a 50-50 level fight at the time, not every single one of those fighters is going to be looked at as a Hall of Famer. It's kind of like the NBA basketball talks. Like when you hear LeBron James fans try to tear down Michael Jordan's resume during the 90s, they say, oh, he didn't face anyone during the 90s because these guys aren't Hall of Famers. Right, but that doesn't mean for that particular year that you were not great. So when you take a look at once again Josh Taylor, for example, when he beat Jose Ramirez and Regis Prograis, those guys may not be considered Hall of Famers, but at the end of the day, they were looked at as very dangerous, undefeated fighters at the time. And that's why, someone made this comment with Usyk in the comment section, and I wanted to address it because, people say, well, how many Hall of Famers has he really beat? And of course, you can also make the same thing with Canelo and Crawford. Well, first of all, we don't know how many of these guys are going to be Hall of Famers because they're still in their careers. So that's first off. Second of all, when you talk about it, Usyk came in a division that everyone was pretty much just trying to get their start. So we don't know how great Morris Bradis ever would have been, or Murat Gassi, or some of these other guys, or Michael Hunter, because they were undefeated when Usyk beat them all. And they were just kind of, like Usyk, trying to find their way. So Usyk was in a fresh cruiserweight division, and he unified it. So that's why it's a little bit hard to kind of judge there. But I definitely understand your point. But Crawford, I'm not, once again, I'm not one for this Hall of Fame debate because I do believe that Spence and Porter will be Hall of Famers. I think they deserve to be. Now, will Gamboa be a Hall of Famer? Maybe. I'm not sure. Will Victor Postal be a Hall of Famer? Maybe. I don't know. But the thing is that when Crawford fought those guys, they were looked at as, big level fights. So that's why I give Crawford credit, whether they're going to be Hall of Famers or not. I don't like to degrade fights just off of that.
Yeah, and also to also mention that Terrence Crawford was also the underdog in the Ricky Burns fight as well.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, I mean, I do have to give Crawford credit for that Ricky Burns fight, especially since Ricky Burns later on became a 3-division world champion.
No, yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I would say that Ricky Burns still is a solid B grade level win, but I mean, and it's definitely something to add to Crawford's resume. But yeah, no, I understand what you mean completely.
Yeah,
But yeah, man, I agree with some of your points, not with all of them, but I definitely understand where you're coming from. Um, but I would say that Usyk and Crawford and Canelo, to me, they're all on a very similar level. That's why I always say that. I think for the greatest of this generation, you can debate who it is. In terms of his resume, the point that you brought up earlier about, well, just take a look at Crawford fight, you can just tell how great he is. And you can, but that's also a little bit of a dangerous argument at times because I always bring up Mike Tyson as an example. When you take a look at Mike Tyson, the man looked like an absolute genetic freak. The man was just beating pretty much everybody, but there wasn't really much around when he was a unified champion. It pretty much was, the former contenders of the last generation that, to be quite honest with you, had a lot of drug problems. And, he ended up beating them. But then when he finally got in the ring with Holyfield, and other guys like that, he was favored to win, but he never did. So that's why it's always a little bit hard to judge. I think Crawford is greater than what Tyson was because he did beat Spence. He beat his counterpart. But that's why it's always hard to just judge off of pure skill or domination on the screen because you don't know how dominant that fighter is going to be until they actually test themselves. So that's why resume, in my view, is always the most important factor. But Crawford, to be fair, once again, he beat the counterpart in Spence, and he proved to everybody that he was debatably the best fighter of this generation and certainly the best fighter around his weight classes. So that's why I give Crawford a lot of credit.
Okay, when you say that resume is the most important factor, right? Do you mean like in terms of greatness or in terms of who's going to win a fight?
I
Because if
mean,
you're
in
talking,
terms of how many elite caliber fighters or A grade level talented fighters that you've beaten. So how many times that you've truly tested yourself? Like when we take a look at Mayweather, we know for sure that in my view that he has a great resume because Cotto, Mosley, Marquez, Pacquiao, De La Hoya, Canelo, all those guys, they were all considered, possibly top 10 pound for pound level guys when Mayweather fought them. If you're beating guys like, say, like Deontay Wilder, like a lot of people love to complain about how Wilder, like, why wasn't he, respected as top 10 pound per pound? Well, it's hard to judge when you're beating guys like Archer Spiltzka and, Chris Arreola and guys like that. So you have to be fighting guys that, in my view, are decent level competition. Now, competition is somewhat subjective, depending on what you believe. But, once again, I give Crawford about 5, maybe 6 A grade level wins. But I give him about 5 A grade level wins. So that's what I mean by resume. And that's why I say when it comes to Canelo, I say that he has the best resume in this era because I think there's about maybe 10 to 11 fighters that you can claim on his resume are A grade. that were looked at as A grade at the time. So that's what I mean by resume.
Right. Okay, that's fair. That's a fair analysis. But then
Yeah.
it's just like the thing that I hate that some people do is that they just base every single thing off of resume. Like, oh, your resume is this, so that means I'm just better than you. I'm like, no, it does not.
Yeah.
I mean, like, to be honest, if we were going off a resume, right? Then why did Bivol beat Canelo Alvarez? Because
Yeah.
Bivol's resume was far inferior than Canelo Alvarez's resume, but yet Bivol was able to go in there and school him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's why I say that if Terrence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez, if they fight, I guess the winner wins the era, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, you said if Canelo and Crawford win, or I mean, if Canelo and Crawford fight.
Yeah, the winner wins the whole era.
I see that's a little bit tough there, and it's very similar with Canelo and Bivol to me because that fight, Crawford and Canelo is very similar to Canelo and Bivol because I don't think that Canelo ever really should have been in the ring with someone like a Bivol in the first place, and I think it's the same thing with Crawford and Canelo. There's just a clear size advantage there, but I definitely understand what you're saying. Resume, I do think has to be the most important factor usually when we're factoring in things. But of course, it's not absolutely everything. When you talk about, for example, Bernard Hopkins, like I talk about the debate between Bernard Hopkins and Joe Calzaghe quite a lot. And many people would put Bernard Hopkins over Joe Calzaghe. In my view, they're in the same room. And a lot of people would not agree. Now, do I think that Joe Calzaghe quite has the resume of Bernard Hopkins? No, I don't. But at the same time, Joe Calzaghe also retired undefeated. He also beat Bernard, even in his 40s, but still looked at as a top pound for pound level fighter. And the reason why Bernard, even though he has a great resume, the reason why I don't really put him in my top 10 is because he lost a lot of the bigger pound for pound fights that he was always in when they were near the same size or pound for pound level talents. So I understand definitely what you're saying. It's not all about the resume. I think that the resume is the main thing that you have to judge off of. But if you're also a fighter that maybe has a better resume, but loses some of your bigger pound for pound fights, like if we're, let's say, for example, comparing Crawford and Vasily Lomachenko, I would not put Lomachenko over Crawford, even though I think that Lomachenko, you can debate, has more A grade level wins on his resume than Crawford, at least debatably, or about the same, but I would not put him over Crawford because, Lomachenko failed against Teofimo Lopez and also against Devin Haney. So I definitely understand what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, I don't use the lenses of resume to like to determine everything. Like resume does not really determine all the time like who the greatest fighter is because you can have a greater resume than me, and then I can go into the
Mhm.
ring, and just and whoop your ass, and then that makes me the greater fighter. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I definitely would agree with that. However,
So
that being said, in terms of it, I think it depends on how many big names you have in your resume. Also, at one point in time in your career, and also if it's different when you compare, say, Spence and Crawford or yeah, it's different when you compare, say, Spence and Crawford because, in my view, the welterweight resume was better with Spence because he beat the bigger names there. However, it doesn't really matter because Crawford whooped his ass in that fight. So to me, that's pretty much null and void, anyways. So Crawford is always going to be remembered as greater than Spence, as he should be. But when you talk about resumes compared to Canelo and Crawford and Usyk, it's going to be different because those guys more than likely are never going to fight each other unless we're talking about Canelo versus Crawford. So that's going to be a little bit different. And it's always going to be a little bit harder to compare in those in terms of Spence versus Crawford because that was a solved solution. But it's not with Canelo and Crawford and Usyk. You can kind of have open debates about it because they're in different places in the weight classes. But like I said, I know what you mean. The resume is not absolutely everything, but I think that it is the main thing you have to judge by. But it depends on the situation. Like I said, with Spence, since he got so since he got so beat up against Crawford, it's not really going to matter anyway.
yeah, I get that take. Yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah. So like, in order to tell who's a better fighter, you have to look at resume, but to see who would win a fight, you have to look at like more like skill and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. That is, I think that's a not a bad point, but like I said, you also have to be very careful with that because there's many fighters and many people, not just in this. Whenever I talk about NFL football, I always talk about Aaron Rodgers, and the reason why I always use this comparison is because every single year he would always be ranked as the number one quarterback because they said I've never seen anyone that can throw the football like him. He does this, he does this. But then whenever he usually fought against a playoff contending team that could actually possibly go to the Super Bowl, 90% of the time he'd lose. So we talk about all this skill, we talk about all this, but then it ended up not being shit in the end anyway because he didn't win. And that's why I always bring up Mike Tyson. That's why, in order to be considered an all-time great, you have to fight decent level competition, and your resume has to be great because we can take a look at the skill set, but if you didn't beat anyone during your era that was looked at as your counterparts, how much does it mean really? Because we don't ever really know how great you are until you actually face adversity, and that's why Crawford had to get in the ring with Spence eventually and prove it. But to be fair to him, like I said, he did. But like I said, it's very dangerous to just take a look at someone's skill set just alone because anyone can look highly skilled against certain fighters that are not anywhere near on their same level. Once again, Mike Tyson, had he never fought Evander Holyfield, had he retired after 89, people might be calling him the greatest heavyweight of all time. And some people still do, but in my view, he's not because he lost all the bigger fights. But that's why I said, you always have to eventually prove it with the resume because, you can look skilled, highly skilled against certain fighters, but then you get in the ring against other guys and it may be different. So, I mean, that's why I say resume is always going to be the most important. But I understand what you mean. But for Crawford's sake, because he did beat Spence, his situation is going to be different because eventually he got in the ring and did prove himself to be that guy.
Yeah, and also another thing I can mention is that Crawford's on his way to becoming a 3 division undisputed world champion. I mean, his resume is going to get better and better. It's
Yeah,
like,
if he does go for that. I'm not quite sure if he's actually going to go for that or not. I don't know what his next plans are. He is going to turn 38 next year, and apparently he suffered a slight injury or something like that. I think he's trying to get Canelo. But in my view, Crawford should go for undisputed at 154. But I mean, I understand why he wants the Canelo fight. But yeah, I mean, I definitely get it.
oh yeah, of course. And also like for the it's just like the way that some people just look at resume, right? Like everybody has their own expectations. Like no fighter is gonna really have the same exact resume. They're all gonna be doing different things. They're all gonna be going their own route. And I just hate it like how people just like to compare resumes like all the time to just determine every single thing. It's dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think that is the main thing personally in my view. Do have to judge by, but I get what you mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, dog. But yeah, man. Nice to have you on here, Hollow Ninja. If there's anything else you want to say, feel free to say it. We might get a couple more people on here. Then I might get back to the comment section as well because there's some other points I want to talk about. But always great to hear from you and anyone else who wants to tune into the stream. Thank you for joining me.
Nothing much, man. New Year's coming. Let's all do our best. Make it the best year of our lives, and just keep on
Hell
going.
yeah, man. I feel it.
Yeah, man. It's February 22nd, man. Radar season. I can't wait.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot the big Bevo versus Artur Beterbiev fight. Yeah, that's gonna be huge. It's gonna be huge. I'm gonna try to do a live stream on that, but we'll see. But yeah,
And
man,
I'm
happy New Year to all y'all and you, Mr. Hollow Ninja. Yeah, feel free to tune in anytime, man. Always glad to have you.
yeah, I've been subscribed for about a year now, I believe. So
Thanks, man. Thanks, man.
yeah,
Yeah, very much appreciated, dog. Very much appreciated. Love all you guys. Thank y'all. Much love.
yeah. And by the way, I got Israel Madrimov knocking out Virgil Ortiz. Not
Really.
but
Bold prediction. I mean, it's not impossible. Virgil does have some faults, and they both have great. That's going to be a very interesting fight. And to bring up the last point, if Virgil Ortiz does beat Madrimov, let's say relatively easy, that win that Crawford does have over Madrimov, it is going to have to be looked at just a little bit different. But if Madrimov beats Virgil Ortiz, that's going to make the win look even greater. So, like I said, let's see what ends up happening, but that's going to be a great fight because that's going to be a great litmus test about how great both of those fighters actually are. Great fight.
yeah. All right, yeah, but you take it easy,
But
man.
yeah, you too, dog. You too. We're gonna get some more people on the stream, but yeah, take it easy, man. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, I'm gonna address a couple of the comments and maybe get someone else in here. But yeah, thanks, dog. Thanks for tuning in.
No problem. Peace. Peace
Peace
to the
out.
chat.
All right, cool. I'll post the oh man, I don't know if I even want to post a link because last time I did it, my computer damn near froze. Let's see. Uh Female has better wins at 135 and 140 in Lomachenko and Taylor, but I don't hear anyone calling him all-time great. I think that's not the worst point, but I think also part of that is because Teofimo Lopez, he has such a little amount of fights, and on top of that, he also has had a couple of very shaky fights his most recent performances. But I know what you mean. But let's see. So I'm gonna go back to the YouTube video then if one of y'all want to tune in uh, uh, and have a little bit of a conversation, then of course certainly would love to do that. But okay, so let's go back to the YouTube real quick. I gotta try to pause this video because this is about to play. Don't want the volume getting in the way. Okay, so let's see where we left off here. It's taking a little bit to load for whatever reason. Let's see. Okay. Um, So this dude says they are jealous of Usyk because he fights champions and undisputed twice. Crawford fought a Wash, Daryl Spence, and take fight tomato cans and uses weird clauses to win against C minus level fighters. Well, once again, I don't think that Crawford really fought a Wash Spence. Now there would be some people that disagree. The man did have a 14-year layoff. I think that that's probably the furthest that I'll go. But I still think that it was an A grade level win because Spence was coming off with a very impressive performance over Ugas, and Ugas was looked at as a relatively dangerous fighter. Now Tank, for example, like a lot of the LDBC and new media channels, especially, they're trying to push him as this top 5 level pound for pound guy. The reason why I can't do it is because he doesn't have any top 10 level pound for pound wins. And on top of that, most of the fighters that he's fought are B or C grade level fighters, besides Frank Martin and Ryan Garcia, who have never even been champions before. So it's a little bit hard to judge. But yeah, I would agree that Tank's resume, in my view, is overrated. But let's see. Okay, so let me sit up here for this one. So this dude says Fury is average, Wilder can't box, AJ is a bodybuilder, Klitschko was one-dimensional, Canelo fights smaller guys, and Floyd runs all the time. There's always a critic. Usyk has to go down as great. His color does not matter. How many fighters can beat an undefeated over 250 pound 6'8" champion who can both box and punch in any era? I agree with you, Dwight Hales. I agree with you. I think that that is the comment that I probably agree with the most so far. There always is going to be a knack against somebody, and I definitely don't think Fury is average. And I mean that Wilder, he's not the best of boxers, but to his credit, he's still a very dangerous boxer. And very similar to kind of George Foreman during his era. Never was a great boxer, but someone that was always very dangerous because of his level of size and power. Wilder was very similar. But let's see. So let's see. Got to give Usyk his dues. He came up to heavyweight and beat the 3 best fighters: Fury, Joshua, and Dubois. I agree. But let's see. Usyk has essentially achieved a similar yet slightly better run than Holyfield's. I agree. I'm not yet sure where I'd rank him among the all-time greats. That's debatable. But regardless, we're talking about an extremely rare type of boxing talent here, especially at his age. I'm not sure how long he'll be able to keep this up, though. I'm not really sure either because he's going to turn 38 very soon. But we'll see about that. Okay, so let's see this dude's top 10. What was top 10 all-time great heavyweights list? So he has Muhammad Ali at number 1. I can't disagree there. Lennox Lewis at 2. I can't disagree. Number 3, Rocky Marciano. Number 4, Joe Louis. I'm not necessarily disagree with him being that high just because I think Joe Louis was not always fighting some of the best fighters around. And not even because I want to use the excuse of, oh, well, that era was weak. But honestly, you're not going to find him fighting a lot of the elite black fighters of that era. And then eventually he did lose to Ezra Charles, I believe. And I'm not sure if he ever beat him. Now, he did beat Jersey Joe Walcott, I believe, a couple times. But he did not beat Ezra Charles. That's why, in my view, Rocky Marciano is over him. But anyway, and on top of that, he lost to Max Smelling. But, I mean, he still deserves to be on the top 10 list, in my view. Mike Tyson at 5, I can't agree with. Of course, was undisputed at a time, I believe. And he was phenomenal in terms of talent, but just lost too many big fights. Lost pretty much every big 50-50 fight of his career. That's why I can't put him in the top 5. George Foreman at 6. I would agree. Usyk at 7. I could see that. Larry Holmes at 8. Holyfield at 9. Klitschko at 10. Not the worst list in my personal view. Would maybe switch some around, but I understand what you're talking about. Student Mike Rodriguez, 570 says boxing realist speaking all facts. Thank you, sir. So let's see. This dude looks like a Russian name. He says, author, please make a video on the topic of comparing the greatness of boxers of past generations and modern boxers. It is also interesting to discuss the issue of criteria for assessing greatness. I agree. I am waiting for your video. Thank you in advance. P.S. When discussing almost any modern boxer fans of cave boxing and Mike Tyson and me fly out to begin to prove that the boxers of the past eras were the real deal and very strong, they would now defeat all the champions in one evening. I agree. Many people love to use this debate about how the fighters of the past, how they would just completely run through every division of the day. I'm not a person that believes that, but we see this in every sport. We see this in football. We see this in soccer. We see this in tennis, where, all these guys, basketball, these guys wouldn't last in the 90s, so they wouldn't last during this time. And how do we know that? Now, when we talk about the heavyweights of this era, such as Fury and AJ Anthony, Joshua and Joseph Parker and Andrew Ruiz, am I saying that all those guys, in terms of skill for skill, absolutely match up with some of the fighters that I seen during the 90s or the 80s? No, not absolutely, not always. But at the end of the day, how do we know that those guys would have not been championship level or very competitive during that era? At the end of the day, you're talking about AJ Anthony Joshua, who is relatively skilled, not the most skilled fighter I've ever seen, not the highest of boxing IQs, but he's 6'6", has knockout power in either hand, one shot knockout power in either hand, can relatively box and beat a whole lot of the great contenders of today. Joseph Parker, very quick hands, decent power, pretty much can move around relatively well. How do we know that he would have not been competitive? Tyson Fury, 6'9", about 260 pounds, decent power, decent speed, can box relatively well. So would those guys have been competitive in other eras? Yeah, in my personal view, they would have. Deontay Wilder, not the greatest of boxers, very sloppy and not the highest boxing IQs, but a shot that can knock anyone out in one punch, and a guy that is 6'7" with an 80-something inch arm reach. So, I mean, yeah, those guys, in my personal view, they, would still be somewhat competitive in other eras. Now, would they have absolutely beat every single one of the fighters that we're talking about? Who knows? But, once again, that's why I don't use the, the past era was just so much greater, because you just never personally know. Now, there are certain weak eras that I think were about, like, when Mike Tyson was undisputed, I thought that was a weaker era because you really had no true A-grade level threats other than maybe Michael Spinks, who was really more of a natural cruiserweight at the time. But I mean, Tyson still beat him. But really, other than that, they pretty much were a lot of their home's leftovers who really were also not that elite of fighters anyway. And of course, the Klitschko era, I always say that my personal view was not that elite, but yeah. So this person here, Boxing Learner 1996, he says, Oleksandr, of course, talking about Usyk, is the best fighter post-Mayweather/Pacquiao era. I think that it's a debate between himself, Crawford, and Canelo, in my personal view. But anyway, let's see. Let me click on the StreamYard Studio. Okay. LDBC says past fighters run through this era, but won't say the same thing about Marciano or Jess Willard. Yeah, I do somewhat agree. Now, Jess Willard, I don't know enough about. So I'm not really going to talk about it much, but Marciano, in my personal view, a little bit rocky, no pun intended, in terms of his style. A little bit rough around the edges, but beat everyone of his day. Even though some of them were a bit older at times, they were still at good points in their career. But yeah, anyway. But let's see. So Usyk is a real bad man, especially when people don't want to give him his just dues. You think God is stupid. But anyway, but I agree that Usyk is a great all-around fighter. I think he's a great fighter, and I think that he is an all-time great. But let's continue. Um, so let's see. Let's see some of the replies to this, actually, because I'm sure that there's going to be a couple of comments. This dude says, "Nah, Canelo is and Lomachenko in a way and Chocolatito along with Usyk." Well, I can't really put Chocolatito nor Lomachenko on the Usyk level because when they did something that Usyk tried to do, they were not able to do it. Now, Canelo, of course, lost to Bivol, so one can make that point. But I mean, Bivol was not only was he an A+ level skilled boxer, but Canelo, he really should have never been there in the first place. So I give Canelo a little bit of a break for that. But anyway. As much as I like Crawford and Chocolatito, Canelo and Usyk are far above them in resume. I would debate that they have better resumes than them. Certainly better than Chocolatito, but I think that definitely Canelo would have the best resume of his era. And you can also debate that Usyk is slightly above Crawford, slightly. But anyway, let's see. And then these, they're talking about Chocolatito. Well, Chocolatito is going to be a Hall of Famer in my view, deservingly. But in terms of the all-time great conversation, I'm just not really sure if I can quite put him there, because I just don't know if he has enough for his resume. Because a lot of the times with those lighter weight classes, there is not a lot of the times, as elite of competition. They're just not known as the glamour divisions. Now, sometimes it also can be used as an excuse, because people do not really watch those divisions like that. But I think with Roman Chocolatito, I don't know really how many A-grade level fighters I can debate on his resume other than Juan Francisco and Estrada and maybe a couple of others. But anyway, this dude says, Tim, talking about Timothy Bradley hating on a non-African fighter, shocker. Well, I actually don't think that he was hating on Usyk in terms of racial things. I think that, once again, this is one of those guys that, is saying that, oh, these fighters, they can't compare at all, to some of these older fighters, and, they would never last in another era. And I just don't completely agree with that. I think that that's, I think that that's something that, many people, that like try to use pretty much to keep certain fighters down, or because they worship or idolize a lot of these older fighters like Ali. But that doesn't mean that certain fighters cannot compete with them. So I mean, just is what it is. But let's see. So this dude says, just because you were the best in your time doesn't mean you are the best ever. Right. Well, in my video, I never say that Usyk is the best ever. I never say that. So I'm not really quite sure if people are watching my videos or if they're referring to other people. Like if we talk about basketball, for example, and this is a comparison that I would use, I don't think that Dirk Nowitzki, who's one of the greatest small forwards of all time, I believe that he wasn't a small forward. I think he was a power forward. But Dirk Nowitzki, who's one of the greater power forwards of all time, an MVP and a NBA Finals MVP and an NBA Finals winner, NBA champion, I don't think that Dirk Nowitzki is on the same level as a Michael Jordan, or as a Larry Bird or something like that, or Magic Johnson or a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But that doesn't mean, in my personal view, that he still can be an all-time great, because how many NBA champions do we really have? So I think that people are thinking that just because Usyk is being called as an all-time great by a certain amount of people, that immediately he has to be on the level of Ali or Lennox Lewis or some of these other guys. And I don't think that that's what people are saying. Now, some people, of course, are trying to say that. And what I will state is this: Usyk is going to have his place in history. In my view, he's at least knocking on the door of the top 30 to top 20 fighters of all time. Like I said, he's right there with Canelo and Crawford. All those guys are knocking on the door of at least top 30 to top 20 of all time, in my view. But anyway. So let's see. This dude, Casey Cook, says Anthony Joshua is mostly Nigerian. He's black. And this was a response too, because, of course, Aki TV, he keeps making these points about how, well, Usyk, he didn't really fight as great a competition, and the heavyweight division era was dead because there's not any elite black American level fighters on the heavyweight division. And like I said, if you want to use that debate, I would someone get it, because black American fighters, a lot of the times, they could be the most elite or the most talented fighters out there. But if we're going to use that, then once again, don't call Floyd Mayweather Jr. the greatest of all time, because he only fought really two elite black American fighters. Really only one in Sugar Shane Mosley, because in my view, Zab Judah, he wasn't ever elite. He was a guy that would lose a lot of his bigger fights, and already lost multiple times by the time Mayweather fought him. So if we're also talking about that, do not call Andre SG Ward an all-time great level fighter. And Deontay Wilder never should have been in your top 4 pound for pound, but you notice with them that it's different. But anyway, let's see. So this dude says if he fought and defeated Bacoli, I'd say he's not overrated, but I think Bacoli flattens him like he did to Anderson. Then they won't fight him. Dubois, Zhang, Fury, Parker, all of them. So Wilder frees this guy out. It tells me they know something they're not telling us. Well, Bacoli, who of course I believe is an African fighter, who was the guy that knocked out Jared Anderson, who was supposed to be the new saving grace for American heavyweight boxing. Martin Bacoli, of course, I think is a relatively talented boxer, but he's never been a champion. So that's why I can't really hold that against Usyk, because Fury was a championship level caliber fighter and looked at as one of the greats of his era. So was AJ Anthony Joshua. Eventually, Dubois became an elite level champion. I need to see Bacoli win something first, because this is kind of something that they did with Luis Ortiz for a long time. Like I remember when Aki TV and these LDBC and new media channels, they kept trying to debate that Deontay Wilder was over AJ Anthony Joshua, and they said, oh, well, AJ, didn't even fight Luis Ortiz. And yeah, AJ has fought all these contenders and Joseph Parker and Andrew Ruiz, but, Luis Ortiz is better than any of those guys. And I mean, they kept trying to use that argument, but it was never proven. And then eventually Luis Ortiz fought I believe Andrew Ruiz, and he lost. And now, of course, he was older, but Luis Ortiz, when he fought Deontay Wilder, was old. So, I mean, it's just, how good are these guys really? That's why I say you have to judge off a resume. That's the main thing that you have to judge off of, because you never know how great a fighter actually is until they finally step in the ring with somebody. And, I was talking to Hollow Ninja earlier, and he said that we shouldn't rank everything by resume. And I agree, you shouldn't rank everything by resume. But that is the main thing that you do have to judge because of the Luis Ortiz, for example. He looked, some people would debate that he was more talented than Andrew Ruiz and Dillian White and some of these other guys. Well, look what happened. He got in the ring with Andrew Ruiz and he lost. So that's why we always got to see it to believe it. But anyways, so Billy Buck says 78 Sports just said Usyk was a Hall of Famer, so you're not accurate. Well, maybe that's a response to me saying that a lot of the LDBC and new media are trying to tear down Usyk. Well, that doesn't mean that every channel is going to be the same, but a lot of them are. Anyways, saying they're doing everything to pull this man down. Well, a lot of the LDBC and new media channels are, once again, because they're very bitter that a lot of their black fighters, or a lot of their favorite black fighters, were also treated not so well, and that a lot of people try to pull down their accomplishments as well. But that's why I say the LDBC and new media, you can't really trust them for a logical or an objective analysis, because, like I said, they're like that one girlfriend that's trying to get revenge on their ex-boyfriend for breaking up with them, or, not treating them super well. Like she won't leave him alone because she says, you put me through hell, so now I'm going to put you through hell. That's what the LDBC and new media are. Because you treated our black fighters so badly, we're going to go after your fighters now. And if you have that energy, I mean, that's up to you. But like I said, just don't call yourself a logical or an objective commentator, because that's a very, very emotional response. But let's see. This dude says Marciano beat old fighters. Now, let me actually talk about this very quickly, because Marciano barely gets brought up in all-time great conversations now. Marciano did beat some fighters that were a little bit older, but keep in mind that Jersey Joe Walcott was still at a very good point in his career. I think that he was about 38 years old by the time Marciano had fought Kim. And one of the points that this guy brought up also, when I brought up Ezra Charles, he said, well, Ezra Charles had already had about 100 fights or 90-something fights by the time that he fought Marciano, right? But he also was coming off of good wins. And on top of that, he gave Marciano a tough fight in the first outing, I believe, until Marciano knocked him out. And once again, people always have to bring up this point of, well, those guys, they have to be greater than some of these fighters because they fought 90 or, 100 plus times, right? But once again, that's a completely different era. And that's why when we talk about Sam Langford and Jack Dempsey and all those guys, we have to look at them differently, because that era was an era to where certain fighters, they'd be Hall of Famers, and maybe they wouldn't be Hall of Famers today. So once again, you're talking about guys that are fighting fighters like that are 12-7, several times in a row or something like that. So once again, that's a completely different era, where today these standards are completely different. But anyway, let's see. This person talking about Usyk, he's definitely overrated. He beat an obese bald man, a bodybuilder, and a quitter. His only decent wins were a cruiserweight. Well, I don't agree with that. I think, once again, that Dubois, he's turned his career around. He ended up beating Ruiz. Not Ruiz. He ended up beating Gerald, what the hell's his name? Big Baby Miller, Jared Big Baby Miller, or whatever the hell his name is. I can't remember, man. I'm confused with my names. But then he ended up beating Filip Perkovic. Then he also ended up beating AJ Anthony Joshua, who I think has not been quite the same ever since Usyk. But Danny Dubois, he got it done. And Fury, of course, he was a very great heavyweight fighter as well. But anyways. Oh, this person says Joshua has never been the same since the Ruiz fight. Don't make it like it was Usyk. Well, he was a little okay. So that's actually not the worst comment in the world, because, of course, if I just come and say that he was never the same after Usyk, it comes across as a little bit disingenuous, because, of course, Ruiz was the first one to defeat Joshua. However, after that, he was still able to rebound because he beat Ruiz in the rematch, and he was able to look really fresh against Kubrat Pulev and some other guys after that. However, when he lost to Usyk, he was never quite the same again. He did not look good at all against Robert Elenius. He didn't look good against Jermaine Franklin, I believe was his name, and some of the guys. He didn't look good in some of those other fights. So, yeah. I think it was because Usyk, when you deal with a boxer like that, it's actually harder and more difficult to lose to a fighter like that than what it is a fighter that just knocks you out and you believe that you can actually beat. And that's why I think Joshua was never actually the same after the Usyk fight, because I still seen a little bit of goodness in him after the Ruiz fight. After Usyk, he was really starting to fall downhill. But anyway, so this next person says, how do we know Mike Tyson could beat a Roach according to your logic? I'm not exactly sure what this man is meaning. But anyway, but what I'm going to state is this: we don't know, once again, what some of these fighters during this generation would have done back in the '90s. We don't know. This is the era of the super heavyweights. Now, a lot of people of this era, do I think that they're quite as talented skill wise as some of the fighters of the '90s? No, I don't. But that being said, they could probably make up for it because of their sheer size combined with the skill that they have. So once again, and that's why we have to always see someone get in the ring first and finally fight those bigger fights, because people thought that Jared Big Baby Anderson, for example, was going to be the next heavyweight champion of the world. Then he gets in the ring against that one African fighter, but Coley, he gets knocked out within 4 or 5 rounds. So once again, that's why resume is always such an important matter. But let's see. He isn't overrated, but he's not a top 10 heavyweight of all time, and I'm a fan of his. Well, I think that you can debate him there, because I don't know if you can really place 10 heavyweights above him, at least if you're talking about more of the modern era. But anyway, Matt is super talented, and I feel he beats anyone at that weight. I'm not actually sure who he's talking about there. Maybe he meant man. I don't know. But this man says Usyk, Crawford, and Canelo are all-time greats. I agree. I think that they all are. But anyway, he says the only person using race is the host of this channel. The LDBC are racist, but they don't like Crawford either. They are Wilder and Spence cheerleaders, right? But the big part of the reason why that is because they like Al Heyman, who of course is a black man that owns the PBC, and they have a little bit of a bitter resentment towards Crawford because he tried to humiliate the PBC. So keep on, once again, that's a big part of the reason. Let's see. He beating weak European fighters and not strong American fighters like Wilder and Jared Anderson. And that's not the worst point, because the 2 American fighters that were supposed to be the saving grace the past several years, they both recently lost by knockout. In Deontay Wilder and that of Jared Big Baby Anderson. And once again, these narratives never came up when Deontay Wilder was around. The LDBC and new media, they kept saying that Wilder was top 4 pound for pound, and now he was going to be one of the greater heavyweights of all time. For pretty much beating nobody. But then when it came to Fury and Usyk's time, then all of a sudden the standards were completely different. But anyway, let's see. This dude says you're making people seem more than what they are to lift your favorite fighter up and make your point. Well, not really. I think that I've been very fair towards Usyk. I think that his resume is a great resume. But a lot of people do that. They do that with Crawford. Once again, I think that the LDBC and new media, they tried to make the Kell Brook and the Amir Khan and the Aegis Kavalauskas wins greater than what they actually are, in my personal view. And that's a part of the reason why I also wanted to do this. When you talk about Usyk's run at cruiserweight, once again, in my view, just my view, the 2 undisputed runs that Usyk had are stronger than the 2 undisputed runs that Crawford had. Just my personal view of it, because I think that Fury is a more dangerous fighter than Spence, just in my personal view. To be honest with you, I think that he can actually do more things as a boxer than what Errol Spence Jr. can do, at least debatably. I think Spence is a great pressure fighter. I think that he can fight on the back foot, but I think you have to be the right kind of fighter for him to do that. He does not move his head very well, and there are certain other faults as well. But anyway, but a lot of people do that. But no, I'm not. I'm not doing that with Usyk. I think I've been relatively fair to the man. But let's see. So this dude says, name 5 great fighters Usyk has beat. Well, once again, that's a loaded question, because we can do that with a bunch of other fighters. We can take a look, at certain fighters of this generation and say, well, how many great fighters have they beat actually? And we can take a look at other resumes. Like we can take a look, at Evander Holyfield. How many great fighters has he beat actually? Because of course he beat Riddick Bowe, who's a relatively great fighter. But if we want to, pinpoint certain things or cherry pick certain things, Riddick Bowe only ever won 1 title in his career, I believe. And to be honest with you, I only recognize 2 heavyweights on his resume, and Andrew Galata and Evander Holyfield. Man never beat anybody else, So is he really a super great fighter? Is Michael Moore really a great fighter who has a win over Evander Holyfield and a couple other guys, but also lost to a 45, 46-year-old George Foreman? So, I mean, how great is Michael Moore really? How great is Mike Tyson really? Because Mike Tyson lost every big A-grade fight in his career. So once again, we have to be very careful with that debate. But in terms of naming the greater fighters that he beat during his era, you would probably talk about maybe Marco Huck, but I don't know if I consider him an A-grade level fighter. But Glowacki, I would. Michael Hunter, debatably. Murat Gassiev, Maurice Bradis, Anthony Joshua, Danny Dubois, Tyson Fury, and there might be a couple others on there that I'm forgetting as well. But anyways, let's see. Usyk is the GOAT, blank period. He beat all the best. The Euros are on the top right now. America is nowhere to be found at the moment. Well, I'm not going to agree with that. Maybe for the heavyweight division, but America is still found just in other weight classes. I'm not going to call Usyk the GOAT because I don't think that there's enough of a resume to quite claim that, at least as of yet. But he's definitely an all-time great in my personal view. But anyway, so let's see. So Billy Bucks again says here, Mike Tyson has a better pro career than Loma. I don't know if I can agree with that. Once again, I'm gonna have to come up with this list overall claiming I'm gonna have to start talking about Mike Tyson and in my personal view about who could be a quote unquote all time great fighter. I don't see how Mike Tyson is really an all time great level fighter. I don't think that he's had a better pro career than Loma because to be honest with you, Loma actually won some big level fights. I don't know if Mike Tyson really ever won any of his. But anyways, Billy Buck says boxing been global. It's been global, but there's also certain areas in the world that they would have not been elite, 20, 30 years ago. Like Russia and the Ukraine, for example, and Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, there are all certain areas that now are more abrupt in the boxing scene than what they were 20, 30 years ago. So the talent pool is a little bit, different now. It's a little bit different. But anyway, so let's see. All four kings are great, though. This is another thing by Billy Bucks. Actually, let me respond to this. Actually, um, so so this was my response. I said, well, to be fair, let's talk about Tommy Hearns. Is Tommy Hearns above Usyk? He never officially beat Leonard or Hagler, and he lost to the other fights too. And this guy responds with, of course, the people back then were better in general as other great people besides the four kings. Fighters back then were better in general. That's why anyone from any race will agree that they were great. Well, they were great, but once again, this is what I'm also going to state because this is a narrative that people love to use, especially with Tommy Hearns or Mike Tyson. And I don't really get how Tommy Hearns is usually called, this all-time great level fighter, at least compared to some of the guys when he literally lost every big fight in his career. So Tommy Hearns, for those of you that don't know, he lost to Sugar Ray Leonard, he lost to Marvin Hagler, he also lost to Iran Barkley, and he lost a couple of other fights, I believe, as well. Pretty much, in all honesty, one of the bigger wins of his career was against Wilfredo Benitez and Roberto Duran. But he was supposed to win both of those fights because Tommy Hearns was about 6'1" with about a 78-inch arm reach. The man had similar physical dimensions, at least in terms of height and reach, to that of a cruiserweight or a heavyweight. So that's why I say Tommy Hearns, for example, I don't really put him on the same level as all-time great as some other guys do. Now, he can still be all-time great because I think he was a four-weight division champion or something like that, but he's not on the same level in terms of the top 10 or the top 20. So this is what I'm going to say right here because I consider these fighters all-time greats. I do consider Tommy Hearns an all-time great. I also consider Oscar De La Hoya and Juan Manuel Marquez and Miguel Cotto and Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales as all-time greats as well. And in my personal view, and Sugar Shea Mosley, if you consider all those fighters all-time greats, which in my view they're all in the same class, then Usyk is definitely an all-time great because in my personal view, he's above all those fighters. Because all those fighters that I just mentioned, even though they were all pound for pound at one time and great level fighters and they won certain big matchups, they were never officially for a long period of time looked at as the number one pound for pound fighter because they can never consistently beat the top 10 level pound for pound talents. So just is what it is. But anyways, let's see. Um, let's see. So this man wants to bring up Lomachenko. Okay, let's see. Good video, but I would say this. Loma should have never, and I mean absolutely never, been in any number one pound for pound sensible discussion at the time. That was 1,000% marketing and fanboy hype delusion. Those that don't follow boxing diligently fail to realize that Loma in his 6 and 7 pro fight was already being called number one by ESPN, notably Joe Tessitore, goofy ass. Dude is horrible. Then when Loma only had a record of 9 and 1, Teddy Atlas, like an educated fanboy, told Ward and Crawford that Loma was number one. I agree with that point. However, I think that when you talk about it a little bit later on, that Lomachenko did deserve to be the number one pound per pound. And the reason why that is because he was defeating guys like Nicholas Walters and Guillermo Rigondeaux, Jorge Linares, and then Gary Russell Jr. and other guys like that. He was running through those guys. And that's why Lomachenko was eventually called the number one pound per pound fighter. The narrative that I'm not liking and that I always like to comment on is that these LDBC and the media guys, they keep trying to act like the only reason why Lomachenko was eventually ranked number one pound per pound was to dismiss Crawford or dismiss other black fighters. And that's not the case. The reason why Lomachenko was ranked there is because he was looking like the number one skilled fighter. He was already a three-weight division champion, And in such a short amount of time, he beat like 4 guys that were looked at as the most talented or the best of their weight class. And they were not just some bum ass fighters. Like he beat Gary Russell Jr., he beat Nicholas Walters, Guillermo Rigondeaux, Jorge Linares. At the time, those guys were looked at as the best of their weight classes, or eventually would be. So once again, that's why Lomachenko was ranked #1 pound for pound. But anyway, Crawford has just become undisputed versus an undefeated unified Ndongo, and Ward had just stopped Kovalev. Well, Ward definitely, in my view, should have been #1 pound for pound. But anyway, also Atlas conveniently never mentioned that Loma was allowed to fight for the same WBO. He failed to win versus Salido. Literally in this next match versus Gary Russell Jr. after a loss, which is blatant favoritism and corruption. But hey, in today's box, mofos can lose and get knocked spark out, and in the very next fight get a title shot a la Fedora and Rolly Romero. It's disrespect calling a man 9-1, pound for pound best fighter, anything in the sport, utter rubbish, sweeping corrupted, blatant corruption under the rug. Just because you like a particular fighter doesn't help the sport, never has. Salute, boxing realists. Thank you, sir. I agree with some of the things that you are saying, but I do believe that Lomachenko eventually was #1 pound for pound. But yeah, but there are there's a saying that goes, there are exceptions for exceptional people. For example, Errol Spence Jr. He also recently ended up getting a title shot recently against Fundora. So I mean, there's just exceptions for exceptional fighters. And then Dante Lane, I see that Dante is going crazy in the comment section here. I'm gonna review your comments here in a minute, sir. I'm trying to go through some of these. So Ray Mercer would beat any heavyweight now. Well, that's all speculative. Once again, I don't go off of speculation. And of course, Billy Bucks, he's saying that this is a dead era. And when you talk about dead eras, once again, that's when Mike Tyson was first in the unified era. That was a weak era. When you talk about the Vladimir Klitschko era, that was a weaker era. But I don't think that this is a weak era, because you have guys, once again, like Tyson Fury, who can box decently well, especially for his size, good power and good speed and great boxing ability for his size. It's going to be very hard to get past him. AJ Anthony Joshua, decent knockout, power in either hand, can box decently well, 6'6". Joseph Parker, very quick hands, very powerful, very quick feet, can move around the ring. Flawed, of course, but still a decent fighter of today. Andrew Ruiz, decent defense at his best, very quick hands, very good on the inside, powerful, great chin. So there's a lot of talented heavyweights today. But anyway. So let's see. So this dude says Roberto Duran lost to Hagler, Hearns, and Leonard. He did, but he was supposed to lose most of those fights. The fact that he beat Sugar Ray Leonard in the first fight really was not supposed to happen. And that's why, in my view, Roberto Duran, he's probably over Hagler and Hearns, especially over Hearns. Because no offense, the win that Hearns got over Duran, I really don't even count that. You were supposed to win that fight. You're 6'1" with the 78-inch arm reach. You're fighting a guy that's like, what, 5'7", 5'8", somewhere around there. Come on, man. And a guy that was, started off his career at 135. I don't count that shit. But anyways. So let's see. Yes, he's overrated. He is not he is a Hall of Famer. Usyk versus Wilder, or Usyk versus Zhang fights next. Also, European fighters are inferior to American boxers on average. Well, they have been, in the past, but once again, European fighters, especially with some of these new programs in the amateurs, they've proven overall, once again, to become a little bit greater. And also, to be fair, it's not like Britain has not been around, for boxing's history. We've always had Great Britain fighters, whether it be Lennox Lewis or Joe Calzaghe, or earlier on, somewhere around there, maybe a Chris Eubank or a Nigel Benn. Britain has always kind of been a part of boxing's history. So let's not just pretend that Usyk was, fighting all these bum ass guys, But anyway, man. But okay, so let's see what Dante Lane has to say here. Okay. So this dude says, so someone been calling me out. So we talking about Usyk as a top 10 heavyweight. Well, all time, yes, sir. I think that you can debate that. But anyways, this dude says great history. Listen, I mostly just know hockey fight history. Gotta admit, man, I don't know shit about hockey, but good on you, man. Anyway. So this dude, Dante Lane, says Joshua was better after Ruiz. He was just worried about getting hit. He lost the balls he used to have after Ruiz. He was a smarter boxer, and if he was more rough, he could have beat Usyk, in my opinion. Well, it's possible, but he didn't. And I thought that he was at pretty much the best point in his career, and Usyk was able to embarrass him, really. So, I mean, it is what it is. But let's see. Primo Carnera and Value have been around. Super heavy isn't a new weight class, right? But when you talk about this era, when you excuse me, when you talk about super heavyweights that can actually box decently well, that kind of started with the Vladimir Klitschko or the Klitschko brothers. That's pretty much when that started. Once the Klitschko's, when they really started in boxing, that was when the super heavyweights really started being more successful in terms of boxing skill. So when you talk about guys like Primo Carnera, I mean, I think he was champion at one point in time, but I mean that was that was an era where, I mean, a lot of the heavyweight champions, to be honest with you, probably weren't the most elite, according to my knowledge. About Nikolai Valuev, like Dante tried to make a very similar point. Valuev was never an elite level fighter. He won the belt at one point in time. He also really should have lost to like a 40-year-old Evander Holyfield. When you talk about, that's why I say, like, when you're talking about Fury and AJ, like, you can't even compare them to someone like a Primo Carnera and especially a Valuev. They're just completely different. Anyways. But let's see. Ali beat 14 world champions and 11 Hall of Famers, but he's a bum. Well, I'm not really sure who's calling Ali a bum. But anyway, well, let's see. Usyk beat 10 world champions and possibly 2 Hall of Famers with Joshua and Huck. Fury probably will be a Hall of Famer, but he doesn't deserve it. No, I think Fury deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He won every belt in that weight class. He won the Ring Magazine title. He beat Klitschko, he beat Wilder, and he also beat White. So, in my view, he's in the Hall of Fame. In my view, AJ and Wilder will also be in the Hall of Fame, in my view. But anyway. So let's see. Holyfield fought 14 Hall of Famers and beat 8 of them. Usyk fought 2 Hall of Famers. I'll give him Huck and Joshua Glowacki died against Okoli. His best win was Huck. And I mean, he might have a little bit of point there, but once again, Usyk, I thought, fought a lot of greatly talented fighters at the cruiserweight division. But let's see, because now this man's going to bring up Lomachenko. Loma never beat a Hall of Famer unless he's going to say Linares is a Hall of Famer. Gammo isn't. Loma's resume is good. He beat champions, not Hall of Famers. Well, sometimes that's what you have to go off of, because once again, sometimes champions, they can be great at the moment or great in that particular time, but they may not end up in the Hall of Fame. Sometimes certain fighters are not the same after they end up losing. And I do think that, again, we're now, my personal view, is a Hall of Famer. I think that you can debate that Jorge Linares is a Hall of Famer. I think that you can debate that Gary Russell Jr. is a Hall of Famer. But just because a fighter is not a Hall of Famer doesn't always mean that they were still not great at the time. Like when we take a look, at certain wins, overall in certain people's careers, let's just say, for example, that Kostya Tszyu, when he fought Zab Judah, had Zab Judah retired a couple of fights after that, we can sit here and say that, Zab Judah's not a Hall of Famer, so we can't really count that, right? But he was still looked at as supremely talented, and that was looked at as a big fight at the time. Brian Castano, for example, is not a Hall of Famer, I don't think, right now. Jamel Charlo still beat him when it was looked at as a 50-50 level fight. So that's why that argument, it's very dangerous, because you can't always go by just who's a Hall of Famer. But anyway, this guy says Loma also lost every big fight of his career, though. Well, that's not true, and this is also another thing that I really want to talk about. No, Loma did not almost lose every big fight in his career. Now, he did lose to T1 Devin Haney, where he was probably outsized by them. Now, if he was the fighter that many people said that he probably should have beaten them. But, I mean, to say that he lost every big fight in his career, no, he didn't, because he beat Nicholas Walters, who was looked at as the best of his division. He beat Rigondeaux, he beat Jorge Linares, and he beat Gary Russell Jr., so that's not fair. And, of course, he beat Orlando Salido. Orlando Salido beat him, but that was in the second professional fight of his career. I mean, that would have been like, Crawford or Canelo in the second professional fight of their career. Of course, being experienced in the amateurs like Lomachenko would have been. But that would have been like them stepping in the ring with, an experienced champion, that, was very rugged and very rough and very experienced in their second professional fight. So that's something that you have to compare completely different. But anyways, let's see. Linares isn't a Hall of Famer. Rigo isn't either. Gary Russell is a dud. I can't agree with that necessarily. Jason Sosa is a gatekeeper. Well, I'd agree. Walters beat Nonito, and even Nonito is a Hall of Famer, but Walters isn't. Well, you actually make a good point there, but you kind of make my point. Because once again, Nicholas Walters beat Nonito Donaire. You're absolutely right. And Nonito Donaire still had a little bit left in him at that time. But Nicholas Walters is not going to be considered a Hall of Famer by some people. So does that mean that Nicholas Walters was not an A-grade level win? Because, at the time, he was considered the top dog there. Stephen Fulton, for example, is not going to be considered a Hall of Famer right now, but it still has to be counted as a big A grade level win because in a way, that was when it was looked at as a super fight. So once again, we have to be careful with that argument. But anyway, who you beat is more important than belts today. Anyone can capture a belt via politics. Well, I don't think that anyone can capture a belt in my personal view, but I know what you mean. It's easier to get a belt for certain fighters, and there are definitely a lot of fighters that end up getting belts, and in my personal view, are not really championship level caliber or true championship level caliber, such as Rolly Romero, Isaac Cruz, Mario Barrios, all Javante Tank Davis opponents. I never really thought that any of those guys are true championship level caliber fighters, and that's why all of them either damn near lost their belts or lost their belts recently. So I agree with you there. The resume is the most important thing. But I'd say. Um, you keep saying you like this fighter or this fighter is your favorite fighter. Nobody cares. It doesn't strengthen your argument. I would agree. I'm not seeing anything like that in the comments, but anyway, let's see. Um, so let's see. Fury beat Klitschko. Wilder. White wasn't a champ. If Fury is a Hall of Fame, why isn't John Ruiz in? Joshua defended his belt over and over, unlike Usyk. Right, but it's not all about title defenses either. And what I'm going to state is this. Well, we can make this. Here's also what I'm going to state. David Tua also was not a champion during the time. But many people also talk about David Tua like, oh, man, can you believe that Lennox Lewis beat some of the young, hungry lions like David Tua? David Tua was never a legitimate boxing heavyweight champion. So once again, you have to be careful with that type of argument, man. Dillian White was looked at as a top contender. It would have been a great win, just like when you take a look at Wilder. Luis Ortiz was a great win at the time, but he was never a champion either. He's not going to make the Hall of Fame. So just because certain fighters don't make the Hall of Fame does not mean that they were not A-grade level wins. You have to be very careful with that argument. But anyway, Gary Russell Jr. is not a damn Hall of Famer. LMAO off of what? Stalling mandatories? Well, I mean, probably, to be quite honest with you. I mean, because of the amount of title defenses, and to be fair, he did beat Jojo Diaz. He beat some other guys. He beat Johnny Gonzalez to get the title, who knocked out Abner Mares. So, I mean, yeah, he probably would make the Hall of Fame, at least debatably. John Ruiz beat Holyfield twice, right? But at that time, John Ruiz, and this is also another thing I want to talk about. People try to act like when Roy Jones Jr. defeated John Ruiz, John Ruiz was just this elite level heavyweight. No, he wasn't. He was a decent heavyweight, but he was the weakest link there. By the time that John Ruiz beat Evander Holyfield, he was done. He was coming off the 2 Lennox Lewis fights, and he really should have lost both of those fights. So that's something that's a little bit different. Fury is a greater fighter and a greater champion than John Ruiz. He just is. John Ruiz was able to capture 1 or 2 titles, when he kind of had the opportunity. Fury was actually once upon a time looked at as the best heavyweight of his generation. John Ruiz was never in that conversation. But anyways, excuse me. But let's see. So Pedraza is a 3-weight world champion. It might be Bloma's best win. If not, that Roman. No, well, that's the thing, Nante Lynn. You have to be very careful with that argument, man. That's why I say, because no one actually takes a look at Pedraza or Roman Martinez as Lomachenko's best win. It's either going to be Guillermo Riga now or Nicholas Walters or Gary Russell Jr. because it also matters about peak level talent. That's why, once again, I don't really like that argument because people love to use that argument. You have to be very careful with the Hall of Fame level argument, man. You have to be very careful with that argument because people love overall to do that. No one is ever going to take a look at Lomachenko's record and say, oh, well, Roman Martinez, he's the best one in Lomachenko's career. No one's going to say that. So that's why, once again, you have to be very careful with that argument, man. But anyways, Dillian White is the man, and he was ducked also by many. I love White, but I can't be biased because I like him. Well, I think White is, I mean, there are just certain guys that for their era are very dangerous and very good top contenders, but they just never become champions. During Ali's time, it was Ernie Shavers. During the 90s and during the early 2000s, it was David Tua. And during this era, it was guys like Luis Ortiz and Dillian White. So once again, we have to be very careful. But anyways, I'm gonna post a link, see if anyone else wants to possibly talk about it. Let me see if I can let's see, invite and copy. All right, yeah, it's copied. All right, let me okay. The last time I did this, it damn near froze. So let's see. But if anyone else wants to debate or have a possible conversation, y'all are certainly invited. And then I don't know how much longer the stream is going to last, but we'll see. Okay, so let me send it. Okay, it actually seems to not be freezing this time, so that's good. So once again, if anyone wants to join the stream, I do one at a time. Feel free. If not, then it's cool. But yeah, like I said, with the Usyk conversation, well, once again, what I'm going to say is this: if you count certain fighters like Miguel Cotto, Oscar De La Hoya, Juan Manuel Marquez, Marco Antonio Barrera, and Eric Morales as all-time greats, I personally do count them as all-time level greats. Then, in my view, Usyk definitely deserves to be there. Also, Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield, Usyk really accomplished a little bit more than what Holyfield did. He ended up undefeated, and he beat the quote-unquote Lennox Lewis of his day, who was the biggest man and also considerably also considered the most talented guy of his era before Usyk kind of came in. So that has to count for some as well. But let's see. This guy says Ruiz beat Galata, Rahman, Holyfield, Tony Tucker, Jimmy Thunder. That's 4 champions. I won a Hall of Famer. Tony Tucker. I'm not really ever sure if he was an elite level fighter. Rahman, in my personal view, was decent, but honestly, I think his career is kind of carried by the Lennox Lewis win. I always thought that, like there's just certain fighters that are carried by that one win that they have. George Kambosos is kind of, because he got the Teofimo win. The rest of his career is going to be looked at as different. Jeff Horn because of the Manny Pacquiao win and other guys like that. To be honest with you, just my view, I thought Rahman was one of those fighters. Tony Harrison for beating Charlo. Like people consider them as A-grade fighters, but are they really, really A-grade level fighters? And Galata, he was never a champion. He lost every big fight in his career. Jimmy Thunder, to be honest with you, Jimmy Thunder. That name seems familiar. Actually, let me look him up. I don't think Jimmy Thunder was actually a elite level fighter though. Let me take a look. Jimmy Thunder. Hold on. Isn't that the dude that knocked out someone in yeah. That's the dude that has like the super quick knockout like in the first 3 seconds against that one blonde dude. I know who you're talking about, but I don't think he was ever an elite level fighter. Yeah, his record is 35-14. To be fair, that could be because he got older, but let me check here. Like, let me see if I recognize any of these names. And so far, I'm not. He lost to Chris Bird. He lost to Maurice Harris. Lost to John Ruiz. I mean, I don't know if I can really count that as an elite level win, man. And my thing is freezing up on me here. But anyway, let's see. Oh man, hopefully it unfreezes here in a minute because it's just freezing on me here. Like Jimmy Thunder, man, for example, like I can't count Jimmy Thunder as an elite level win, man. I'm sorry. Galata, decent, but no. Ruiz is a Tyson Fury. Sorry, just not. But is what it is. But I don't know. I might be close to ending the stream because I'm not sure if anyone else wants to join the live. If anyone else wants to possibly join the live and have a debate or bring up your points, certainly feel free. I'll keep it open for a few more minutes, and if no one else wants to be on the live, then that's cool. I'll end it, and we can have another live another time. And honestly, probably a better one because StreamYard is, they're doing some weird shit in terms of their package thing right now. But anyway, so let me talk about this last point. And once again, if anyone else, let's see. So this guy says, Thunder beats Burbick, Tubbs, JB Williamson. Well, I need to see at what time he beat him because did he beat Trevor Burbick after he got knocked out by Mike Tyson? Because after he got knocked out by Mike Tyson, I never heard anything from Trevor Burbick again. Tubbs also. I mean, I'm sorry, Tony. I assume you're talking about Tony Tubbs. Tony Tubbs is not an elite level fighter, man. I'm sorry. You're talking about the Mike Tyson era. That's one of the weaker eras in heavyweight boxing. And that is a true weak heavyweight era. When you talk about this era, it actually has talent. When you talk about the Mike Tyson era, in the late '80s, the mid to late '80s, now that is an example of a true weak heavyweight era. But anyway, yeah, Dante Lane, man, if you want to click the link, man, and join the live, bro. It's up to you. If not, that's cool too. But yeah, it'd be interesting. But yeah, but I just I can't have Jimmy Thunder as someone that I would consider an elite level fighter. Let me look at my phone actually real quick. Hold up. Because let me look at Trevor Burbick because I need to know the context behind this. Trevor Berbick. Berbick. Okay, so let's see when he beat him, because the context is going to completely matter with this. All right, Dante Lane, so he's there. So hold on 1 second, sir. Let's see here. I want to see when. Yeah, see, this is the reason why this matters. So before Dante Lane, before you get on, this is the reason, because after he got knocked out by Mike Tyson, Trevor Berbick was never heard from again. He lost to Carl Williams, he lost to Buster Douglas, and then eventually he beat Thunder. That's why that the context is the most important. But anyway, let's get in here. Let's get him in here and let's see what the man has to say.
Hello, hello.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up, man?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
All right, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
My whole thing, right? And I love
Yeah.
Usyk and I love
Okay,
Loma.
okay, cool.
Can you hear
Aaron,
me?
man, yeah, sure. State some of your points.
There's a lag. There's
Mhm.
a lag.
Yeah.
There's like a 5-second lag or something. There's like a
Okay.
lag.
I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but we'll try it. But yeah, if it don't get better, then we could always do it another time. But yeah, just if you can state some of your points, and I'll react to them, or I'll say my points as well.
Before I say anything, I'm gonna reiterate. I love Usyk. I love Loma.
Yeah.
Loma was ducked in his prime, and I think we all know that. We all know Loma was ducked in his prime.
Yeah.
From Gervonta, from even Haney. I mean, even though they fought, Haney still ducked him, and it took a couple years to fight him, right? Teofimo, I
Mhm.
mean, I have a feeling. I mean, during that timeline, he was talking shit about Loma for a year before they even fought. And then he
Yeah.
fought Comey, and then he fought Loma. But he could have fought him earlier too, right? A lot of people could have fought Loma.
Yeah.
Burchell could have fought Loma. All these guys could have. I mean, we can go down the list of who could have fought Loma when Loma was at 130, 126.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I love Loma, and it even hurts to say
Yeah.
this, but his best win, right? Linares
Mhm.
defended his belt 6 times, maybe
Yeah.
7, 8. I got to double check that. Jose Pedraza, 3-weight world champion, defended his belt maybe 3 or 4 times. Those
Yeah.
are good wins, but are they Hall of Fame wins? And before you say anything, the Usyk thing, I consider AJ a Hall of Famer. AJ
Yeah.
unified the division. He defended his belt multiple times. He fought other world champions. He beat a Hall of Famer, Klitschko. I think AJ is a solid Hall of Famer. And
Yeah.
I don't know if the people in the comment section know who Marco Huck is. Marco Huck is a
Yeah.
cruiserweight legend.
Yeah.
A
The
legend
German
in
one. Yep.
cruiserweight. He's a legend. He beat Ola Afolabi 3 fucking times. That's
Yep.
another world champion. And he defended his belt over. And I can say solid with confidence that Marco Huck is a solid Hall of Famer.
Gotcha.
Usyk, in my eyes, I don't consider Fury a Hall of Famer. I just don't. So I give him AJ, and all right, I give him AJ, and I give him Marco Huck. That's 2 Hall of Famers I got for Usyk.
I got you.
Usyk beat 10 world champions, right? He beat
I
I think
believe so.
he beat 4 at heavy, he beat 6 at cruiser. That was a hell of a run. And Usyk is probably top 2 if he's not better than Holyfield. When he goes back down, he might beat Holyfield's indefinitely.
Yeah.
But my thing is, he didn't to be considered. All right, people are saying I don't know anything about LDBC or anything like that. I don't know anything about that. I just know records. And
Yeah.
Usyk has a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be a top 10 heavyweight.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fun, and he does not have the time now. But he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Loma's a Hall of Famer. I'm sorry if I missed the point or you missed the point. Or I've been rambling, but Loma's a Hall of Famer. Usyk's a Hall of Famer, but to be considered top 10 heavy, that heavyweight has history, 140 years of history.
Yeah.
So that's my thing is Usyk is not top 10. I don't think he's top 20. Heavyweight has a lot of fucking history.
I
There
think
have
okay,
been you.
I'll
All right,
I'll
go ahead.
chime
Go
in
ahead. Go
here
ahead.
really quickly. I think that when you talk about top 20, I think Usyk will definitely be there. I think that in terms of being a top 10 heavyweight of all time, I probably would place him there. I just don't know where. But in terms of your Hall of Fame debate, that this is why once again I think that debate is dangerous because when you talk about, say, for example, if I was going to bring up a point where certain fighters are just never the same again, like we take a look at Crawford versus Gamboa, for example. Gamboa was looked at as one of the most dangerous fighters at around
At the
140.
time.
Yeah,
At the
definitely at
time.
the time. Now, after Crawford, he was never the same fighter ever
No.
again. Now, he was always
No.
a bit flawed, but after that, he was done. Like a
Yeah.
couple fights after that, he lost to a fighter that was like 20-11. So we can take a look at that and be like, well, Gamboa doesn't really have that many Hall of Fame wins. Probably not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that Crawford's best win is probably over, Ricky Burns because Ricky Burns
Yeah.
is like a
Ricky
three-way
Burns.
division
Ricky Burns is
champion.
his best win.
But right. But I don't consider Ricky Burns his best win because I don't think that peak-wise that was ever the best fighter that he ever fought. But when you talk about Crawford's best wins, we're going to be talking about Gamboa. We're going to be talking about Porter, Spence, Victor
But why?
Postol. So that's why that Hall of Fame debate, I think it's a bit risky to go by that. I understand what you mean.
Can I just say one
Yes.
thing?
Mm-hmm.
Ricky, now I know you know this because I know this. Ricky Burns is a three-weight world champion.
Yeah.
And Spence is not. I mean, Spence
Yeah.
is. I mean, all respect to Spence, but he defended his belt 4 times. It was one belt. I mean, it was the 3 that he had. That's
Yeah.
cool, but you can't like. I'm not saying you doing. I'm not saying you're doing this, but Ricky Burns is either way you put it. He's a three-weight world champion, and I would say Ricky Burns is his best win. But I know you
Yeah.
won't. I know you won't. Postol, shit. I love Postol, but he got fucked up versus Crawford. Crawford took his belt. Porter, listen, can we agree on this? Porter was on his way out.
I think he was on his way out, and I think there are certain fighters that can be on their way out, but I still think Porter was an A-grade level win in my view. But I understand what you mean.
Record-wise, Porter's a good name to have on your resume.
Yeah.
Spence is a good name to have on your resume.
Yep.
And even the young man that he fought recently, at 154, is a good name to have on your resume.
Madrimov. Yep.
But I love Crawford. I love Crawford. I
Mhm.
love Loma. I love everybody that can fight somebody that fights that has the balls to fight another champion. Like Bam
Yeah.
Rodriguez fights champions, and No Way fights champions. These people they deserve the respect that they get. But the all right. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you saying?
No. You're all good. I'm just listening. Go ahead.
Crawford has a hell of a career, but Horn is a good win. Horn, based off of the Pacquiao win, do you consider that a good win or no?
I mean, I do. I think that he beat Pacquiao and he was a bit older. And I think it was a fight that could go either way. But I mean, yeah, I still consider it a good win.
Well, Pacquiao came back and fought Thurman.
Yep, that's true.
He beat Thurman and he beat Broner and he beat he fought
Jesse
Ugas.
Vargas as well.
He fought Jesse Vargas too. That
Yep.
was after the Timothy Riley part 3.
Yep.
Pacquiao was still good at the time. Horn is a good win. Crawford's got a little career on him, man. Crawford's got a little career on him, man. Same way with Loma. I hate it, but you know what I would hate? I would hate for Loma to fight Gervonta now because number 1, Gervonta does not deserve it. Number 2, Gervonta's a bitch. Number 3, Loma's just older now. He can't. I don't think he can compete with Gervonta now. I mean, give him 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he would have fucked him up. At 36, he would have fucked him up. Now he's like 38 or 34. He could have fucked him up.
Yeah, listen. What I'll say about that is I'm not sure. What I will state is that if Lomachenko wanted to fight Gervonta Tank Davis, you have one of the belts. You don't pull out of that fight if you really want the fight. Now, what I will state is this: because the LDBC and the media channels are starting to come up with this narrative about how Loma ducked everybody, and don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that there's not certain fights Loma pulled out of, but back in the day, say several years ago, when he was looked at his best, Gervonta, he called him out multiple times. Gervonta did not want to fight him. Mikey Garcia, they keep coming up with this narrative. I don't know why Mikey Garcia keeps getting away with this shit, but they keep saying that Mikey Garcia, that he was avoided. No, what happened was, for the people that don't know the backstory, Loma, after he fought Jorge Linares during that fight, he dislocated and tore his shoulder. Completely fucked it up. So afterwards, he said, I can't fight Mikey Garcia right now. I'm going to need one more fight. Then afterwards, he fought Jose Pedraza, And the next couple of fights, he called out Mikey Garcia relentlessly, and Mikey Garcia relinquished and vacated his WBC
Yeah,
title at 135.
and
Went
fought
up and
Spence.
took the Kell Brook route, went up 2 weight classes, and came up with the excuse of, oh, well, I'm going for greatness. So,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
actually, the matter is that
yeah.
Mikey avoided him. But
But also during that time, Loma broke his hand against Corolla, and then
yep.
Mikey jumped up to fight Spence, and everybody knew who the fuck is saying Loma duck Mikey. That shit's not even real.
Aki TV, Dante's, that's the reason why I've commented on it.
Yeah, but that's
But
not even real.
I agree with you.
Loma wanted to fight everybody. Loma wanted to smoke with everybody. Bob
Yeah.
Arum was letting him go. Bob Arum did not have a leash on Lomachenko.
Yep, that's
He did
yeah,
not
no,
have
back
no
then
leash on
that's true.
Lomachenko.
Now, I do think that when Devin Haney eventually came around, that Lomachenko was not taking that fight because he looked at him as a dangerous mandatory, and I think that he would have rather preferred to have Teo, which honestly I don't really have that much of a problem with. But other than that, I mean, I don't really criticize Lomachenko that much. I wanted to actually go to your point earlier because of multiple weight division champions, because certain people use this. I think that being a multiple weight division champion is a great thing, but here's what I'll say about this. It would depend on what you consider to be more important. Do we consider guys like Ricky Burns and Jose Pedraza greater than Errol Spence Jr. just because they were multiple weight division champions? And I'm not sure if I can go by that argument. Because to me, like I said, resume trumps everything. So when we take a look at Errol Spence, he's not a 3-weight division champion like a Ricky Burns. But when we compare the best wins of Ricky Burns' career, do we really put guys like Ricky Burns above Errol Spence because he's a 3-weight division champion and he beat guys like Roman Martinez and had a draw against Raimundo Beltran and other guys like that? I mean, personally, I would not. If you're a guy that has a better resume within one weight class comparative to a guy that has, more championships in other weight classes but doesn't have the resume, I would not put them above that fighter. So that's why resume to me, once again, and you have to be careful of that because that can depend on the amount of weight classes that you're a champion in. And on top of that, how great you were looked at as the time. We have to take a look at a little bit of both of that. So we also have to take a look, especially at where were they at that point in time in their career. Because that's why I say that's a very dangerous argument to go by sometimes. But yeah, you still there, Dante? Or
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm saying with Spence. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Spence fought Kell Brook after Triple G broke his face.
Yep.
And then he went on to fight. He went on to fight. He fought somebody before he fought Mikey. And Mikey's a good name on your record, but is it a good name on your record? Because Mikey did nothing at 147.
I think that it's a good win the same way that kind of like Jamel Charlo would be for Canelo. I mean, well, actually, I think that that's more impactful because I think that Jamel's more comparable in size to Canelo than what Mikey is for Spence. But I definitely understand what you mean. There definitely has to be a little bit of credit stripped away there, but I do still think it's a great win because to me that's comparable to say when Golovkin beat Kell Brook and what else? Oh yeah, when Lomachenko beat Rigondeaux. But
yeah,
I understand what you mean.
I don't go for that. And hold on, do you think Rigondeaux's a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I do.
Off of what?
I think, well, he's a 2-weight division champion. That's first off. And on top of that, he beat one of the top 3 to top 5 pound-for-pound fighters when they were both at their absolute peak. So, but it depends on what you consider to be a Hall of Famer. Because in my view, someone like a Paulie Malignaggi is a Hall of Famer. In my view, if you're at least a 2-weight division champion, then you're probably a Hall of Fame level fighter. I don't think that the standards are that high for boxing. So when you take a look at a certain amount of champions, I think that they're going to make the Hall of Fame because they were multiple weight division champions. Now, if you're someone that maybe only won one belt ever within, weight classes around you to where you could have moved up or down, maybe someone like, say, a Caleb Plant, even though I think that he was an A-grade level fighter at his best, then yeah, maybe you're not a Hall of Famer. But I think Rigondeaux is. He was considered top 5 or top 10 pound for pound at one point in time. He beat Onita Donaire. He was a 2-weight division champion and a Ring Magazine champion, I believe. So yeah, I do believe he's a Hall of Famer.
Okay. I just because all right, so then John Ruiz is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think John Ruiz is a Hall of Famer. I just
But
don't
he's
think
not.
that he's an elite. He's not. Well, I mean, he might be, but I would have to take a look at it. Are you saying he's not, like, he doesn't deserve to be, or he's not
No,
in the Hall of
I
Fame?
love John Ruiz. I love him. He's one of my favorite fighters, but he's just not. He's literally not a Hall of Famer. And he has a better
Gotcha. Okay.
win over. He has a well. Wait, he beat Holyfield, and he drew with Holyfield, and he beat Rockman. He beat a couple names. The only win that Rigo has on his name is Nonito, and that's it.
I agree with you, but this is also what I'll tell you, because this is when we got to take a look at when they beat them. When Holyfield was beaten by John Ruiz, Holyfield was no longer a champion anymore, I believe. He was coming off the 2 fights with Lennox Lewis. When Rigondeaux beat Nonito Donaire, Donaire was looked at as one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. So that's how we have to also take a look at that there. And also when I took a look at the fact that he beat, I believe you said Trevor Burbank. By the time he beat Trevor Burbank, he had already lost to a multitude of guys. Or like when Jimmy Thunder beat Trevor Burbank, that's what you said. By the time that Jimmy Thunder beat Trevor Burbank, he was not championship level caliber anymore. And that's why I say that you have to compare that differently to say when Mike Tyson beat Trevor Burbank. So they're different. I understand what the point that you're trying to make, but they're just in different worlds, in my personal view. Because when Evander lost to John Ruiz, I can't compare that to when, say, to me, that would be like comparing when Lennox Lewis or when Riddick Bowe beat Evander Holyfield to the same exact time John Ruiz beat him. I just don't think that'd be fair, and I just don't think it's comparable. Just like I also want to say that Inoue beat Donaire at the same level in his career as what Rigondeaux did. But anyways, okay, so yeah, so that's pretty much about it for there. But it seems like Dante, that he disconnected. Maybe he's having some technical difficulties. My bad. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for that part. Anyone else wants to join the stream? Feel free to join the stream. I'll post another invite. Once again, this thing keeps freezing up on me, man. So I apologize if every once in a while it seems a little bit finicky. But oh no, he's back. Okay, here we go.
I don't know what's going on.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
But all right. So you're saying Holyfield was on the slide?
Yeah,
but he won the WBF. A
he won the
discontinued belt,
WBA.
yes.
Wait, the W.
It's a discontinued belt, just like the IBU is a
Hold on,
discontinued
let me
belt.
look at the. God, I want to look on my laptop. It's going to keep freezing up. Well, yeah, I would have to see if that was one of the legitimate belts back then. But I think that when he fought John Ruiz, I did not believe that he was a champion. Now, if I'm wrong about that, you'd have to correct me. But I thought he was coming off the 2 Lennox Lewis losses at the time that he had fought that of a John Ruiz. But let me take a look at it here. I'm gonna take a look at it on Wikipedia because that's the easiest way. But okay, so let's see.
They fought for the vacant. They fought for the vacant.
Okay, let's.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. So he was coming off of the loss to Lennox Lewis. So I actually don't think that. But then he beat John Ruiz after that, won the WBA title, and then lost it in the rematch against John Ruiz, and then they had to draw the 3rd time. So I would not say, in my personal view, that Evander was in the same. I just want to say that he was in the same point in his career.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
My man at 175. Ah, damn. Kovalev lost to Andre Ward, right? And look,
yeah,
I wasn't one of the people that said he was on the slide, but I know he wasn't the same. Now, my eyes don't really matter because he still won another belt after that. He won actually 2 more. He revenged with the Cuban, and then I believe he lost again, and then he beat the European kid.
Yeah.
So even though he's older, and even though he's
I'll tell you this much. Yeah, that's not a bad point that you're making. I do think that Evander was more on the downturn, but like I said, I can't compare that to when. My point being is that I can't compare to when John Ruiz beat Evander to when, say, Lennox Lewis or, say, Riddick Bowe beat Evander, because I think Evander was at a better point in his career. Now, we can still debate maybe that Evander had a little bit left, but once again, I do think that Guillermo Rigondeaux is a Hall of Famer. Now, the question would be is this, because Guillermo Rigondeaux, I think, has more of a case than John Ruiz, debatably, although John Ruiz probably should be in the Hall of Fame as well, because when John Ruiz beat Evander, the question is was Evander a top 10 pound-for-pound level fighter? Because when Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe beat Evander, I think that he was a top 10 level pound for pound fighter. When Rigondeaux beat Nonito Donaire, he was like top 3 on almost everybody's list. When when Inoue beat him, it's not really the same, because when Donaire was there, he may have still been an A- level fighter, but he wasn't top 10 level pound for pound. So that's why I say that there's a difference in terms of when they fought them in their career. Like, for example, once again, when you said Jimmy Thunder beat Arthur, or excuse me, not Arthur, but Trevor Berbick, that was when Trevor Berbick, once again, he already lost several times at that point in time, and he never won a belt again, I believe, after that. But we also have to take a look at when they're fighting these guys, and at what point in time were they in their career. But I understand what you're saying.
So okay, was Nonito the same fighter he was after he lost to Rigondeaux than he was
No, I don't
before he
think
lost to
it was.
Rigondeaux? So then how is that a good win for Rigondeaux? Nonito's a Hall of Famer. Don't get me wrong. Nonito's a hell of a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. Well, there are certain times that when fighters lose, they're just never the same fighter again after they lose, especially for their first time or when they're at their most dominant. And you can see that with certain fighters. Like when you take a look at Deontay Wilder after he lost to Fury, he was never the same fighter again after that. And that just ends up happening with certain fighters when they lose sometimes their first fight. Or sometimes when NBA players or NFL quarterbacks, they lose a championship. You can just tell that sometimes they're just not the same. And I mean, when it came to Nonito Donaire, he was never the same fighter again after Rigo beat him. And when you take a look at Kovalev, he was never the same fighter again after Andre Ward beat him. Now, he was still very good, and so was Donaire, but they were never quite the same as what they once were. So that's what I think you got to take a look at. The mental effect on boxers when they especially get their first loss, or when they get a loss that is looked at the most dominant point in their career, the way that can affect them, I think, is such a big thing. I understand the point that you're trying to make, but I think that you are underestimating the possible mental effect of a first loss of a fighter like Kell Brook, for example. I think that when Errol Spence Jr. defeated him, I still think that it was an A-grade level win because he still had a little bit left. After Errol Spence knocked him out, he was never the same again. So
I don't agree with that, because Kell Brooks, it was the same injury.
Yeah,
that's the reason why he lost, because of his face. His face got cracked. I forget the injury that he had. He had something with his eye.
He had broken orbital eye bone and both the Golovkin and the
So he was. I just don't, because it wouldn't, like, if it wasn't the same injury, then cool. If it was a body shot that took him down, if it was like maybe an uppercut or something away from the eye, maybe, but it was the same injury.
Yeah. You mean when he lost in the Errol Spence fight?
When he lost to the Errol Spence fight, yeah.
Yeah, got you. I think that he still had a little bit of greatness left over. I don't think that he was quite the same ever after his first loss against Golovkin. But that's kind of like comparable to when Canelo beat Kovalev. Like, he's not the same Crusher Kovalev as what he was, but he still has a little bit of greatness left. After Canelo beat Kovalev, like, he was done. There was nothing there. When you talk about Kell Brook, I think he became an A+ level fighter or an A-grade level fighter to maybe an A-. And after the Spence fight, I think he was done. I think he then became a B-grade level fighter, and that's why I think it's a little bit different. Now, I understand what you're saying, but that's why, like, depending on, you have to take a look at certain fighters' careers and say, okay, how much did that loss affect them? And we have to take a look at that by them defeating certain competition in the division. Now, there are certain fighters that lose that one time and they're just completely done. They never have any championship aspirations ever again. There's certain
Tommy Morrison
after that loss. What'd you say?
Tommy Morrison's one of them.
Tommy Morrison, could be one. Once again, Nonito Donaire and Kovalev, they're great examples of guys that still had somewhat of championship aspirations after those losses in the most dominant parts of their career. Now, they were still never quite the same, but they were still very decent champions. Now, certain guys that when they lost, they were never the same again, and we didn't really hear from them ever again. Those would be guys like, maybe Victor Postal, or maybe, other guys like that, but or Gamboa. But I mean, every fighter is different, and that's what I think we got to take a look at.
My thing, going back to the, how much time do you have? Are you gonna end this or what?
No, I'm good. I'm seeing how much more people may talk on the stream. So yeah, go ahead.
I
man.
don't want to hog anything up. If anybody wants to jump in,
Oh no,
but I just want
you're
to
good,
say,
man. You're good.
I just
You're
want to
fine.
say, Usyk is a hell of a fighter. Loma's a hell of a
Yeah,
fighter, but beating Hall
hmm
of Famers matter, and it's not like I'm not shitting on these guys because I'm always gonna watch Loma,
yeah,
even if he loses, I'm gonna watch Loma. I watched Loma
yeah,
since his first fight, since he came out the matter of fact, I watched Loma when he was in the tournament with the it was like a 6 rounder fight. They didn't count it as like a professional fight, but he did this afterwards. And Usyk did the same thing
yeah,
afterwards. It was like this
hmm
transitional from amateur to like professional, whatever it was. I don't know why they didn't count it, but whatever.
yeah,
So like I watched Loma back there with the footwork and just the mid-range right hand, just straight down the pipe.
yep,
Loma's like one of the greatest talents I've ever seen in boxing. He's skilled,
yeah,
athletic, fast, quick, and has a mind. And when he learned how to fight inside, it was over. Like it was over.
yeah.
Um, with
No,
Usyk, the
I agree
same
with you.
thing. Usyk is Usyk is insane. Like he keeps
Yeah,
on impressing me every time that he fights. I did not think he was going to beat Fury. I thought Fury was going to lean on him, hold him, tire him out in the later rounds, get him with a body shot. It didn't happen
yeah,
at all. Twice. It didn't happen
yeah,
twice.
yeah. No, I know
I
what
thought
you
he was
mean.
gonna come in heavier, and he did come in heavier. And I thought he was just gonna fight dirty, because Joshua wanted to fight dirty the second fight. Joshua was holding, going inside, hitting with body shots on the inside. Joshua did a better, in my opinion. Joshua fought better than Fury did both fights for the second fight. Joshua was
Mhm.
coming forward,
I got you.
but my
Yeah,
but I don't look. I consider Joshua a Hall of Famer. I consider Marco Hook a Hall of Famer. Gowaki's best win is Marco Hook.
yeah,
Um, Bradis is a hell of a fighter because he's still fighting right now. Bradis just fought Jay Portara twice. He's one of Usyk's best
yeah,
wins. Fury is definitely a good win. Joshua's a shit. Joshua got to be his best win. Marco Huck is a fucking great win. That's a Hall of Famer. I
hmm
just don't see how like Usyk. Now I love Usyk. I just want to remind everybody I love Usyk.
yeah,
I don't. He has wins over Bradis, Glowacki, Hook. Michael Hunter wasn't a world champion, but he was still a contender.
yeah,
Tony Bellew, Fury twice, Joshua Tice, Chisora. Shit, I'm forgetting
yeah,
someone's name, but he beat 10 world champions.
yeah.
But
Definitely,
that's a good ass number. That's a good fucking number. That's 10 world champions
it
he beat.
definitely is.
But I'm saying
Yeah,
I'm only seeing 2 Hall of Famers there, and to be a top 10 heavyweight, you got to have more than 2 Hall of Famers. Sam Langford, a guy from the 20s and 30s, the motherfucker got 27 wins against Hall of Famers. That's more than Usyk has fights.
yeah. I know what you
Ali
mean.
Ali beat 11 fucking Hall of Famers. It's
Hmm
crazy. He got Joe Frazier twice. Ken Norton, fucking Foreman. He got who else he got? He got Sonny Liston. He got cause the model's younger in the 60s guy. Shit, I forget his name. He got that guy.
Floyd
He
Patterson, probably.
Floyd Patterson. He got Jesus. He got so many people. That's 11
Yeah,
Hall of Famers. I mean, like Joe Lewis. Like Jesus Christ. Like that. Like he defended his belt 25 fucking times. That's more than Usyk has fights. So to
no, I know what you
that's a
mean.
I love
So
Usyk.
what I'll tell you is this. I'm going to bring up 2 points here. So when you talk about heavyweights like Sam Langford, or when you talk about guys like Jack Johnson, it's a little bit hard for me to rank that era because once again, that's an era to where fighters, people be like, oh well, they had 90 to 100 fights, but once again, so many of those fighters could have been like 12-7 or even had negative records. So it's a little bit hard to judge, and I would need to do a little bit more research in terms of what the standards were to be in the Hall of Fame. But what I'm also going to tell you is this, and I'm going to kind of bring up basketball or football here. And this is why I don't always go by the Hall of Fame argument. Because if let's just say, for example, you watch NBA basketball, and you've probably heard the debates before between Michael Jordan and LeBron
Jordan,
James. One of the
LeBron,
debates
yeah.
that LeBron James fans use is that, well, Michael Jordan he didn't face many teams and many Hall of Famers, right? But there are certain things that sometimes can prevent someone from becoming in the Hall of Fame. they can be great for 2 to 3 years and then all of a sudden never be the same if they end up losing in the championship round or something like that, or an injury. For those of you that know enough about NBA basketball, you know about Penny Hardaway back in the 90s, but then I believe he sustained an ankle or a foot injury and he was never the same.
Never the
So people
same.
may take a look at that and be like, oh, well, Penny Hardaway, he's not the same as like some other guys that are several-time All-Stars, but their peak level may have been better than what that several-time All-Star actually was. So when I take a look, for example, at like boxing, there are certain fighters. Like I take a look at Errol Spence Jr., for example, his peak level and his greatness level, at least in terms of the threat that he was, it's going to be better than what Ricky Burns ever was in terms of like the Terrence Bud Crawford opponents that he ever fought. But in terms of the weight classes, yeah, he's more of a weight class, but how much does it really matter? I think it matters to a degree. But in terms of the peak level, I think that the peak level combined with the accomplishments, I think that you have to count both of those and not just how many weight classes that, they've been a champion in. Because certain fighters, once again, they can become a champion in 3 weight classes, but who did they really beat in order to be that? So, I mean, and on top of that, once again, you have certain fighters that are great. And then after that one fight or, a couple fights, they're never the same again. They're just not. So, like I said, I think we have to count that in as well. And in terms of your argument for fighters like Sam Langford and guys like that era, I have to do a little bit more research on it personally. But a big part of the reason why I don't include those guys in my conversations, even though maybe they could be, is because that's just a completely different era with completely different standards, especially because of the amount of fighters that they were allowed to fight that probably were not elite. And I would have to see, overall the level of Hall of Famers. But I understand what you're talking about.
To be in the Hall of Fame, I mean, regardless, look, that I don't like the comments are saying Dubois on his resume. I don't consider Dubois a good fucking fighter. Anyway, I mean, I guess Dubois is the next up, and I guess the young man from the UK is next up, the bigger guy that just beat the American. I don't know, but I mean, in the '90s, right?
Yeah.
There was Holyfield, there was Lennox Lewis, there was
Yeah.
Tyson, there was Holmes, there was Foreman, there was who else was in there? I'm missing one person,
Yeah.
but I can name 6 Hall of Famers from that era alone. I can't name it
Yeah.
because I'm forgetting the last person, but there's 6 Hall of Famers in that era alone. This era, how many Hall of Famers are there? And if you want to count Fury, cool, but who else is
Yeah.
there besides AJ and Fury? And
I'd
Usyk.
say I think Dubois can eventually become a Hall of Famer because what I'm actually going to tell you is this, and just because John Ruiz is not in the Hall of Fame doesn't mean that he's not possibly worthy of it. I mean, when we take a look at fighters like Michael Moore, who I believe is in the Hall of Fame,
Yeah, he's in
if
the Hall of Fame
Danny,
too. 6.
yeah, if Danny
Yeah.
Dubois like continues on his streak, or if he gets knocked out by Usyk and is never the same fighter again after the rematch, I mean, how do we know that Dubois would have not had a similar career compared to Michael Moore? Now that is speculative, so we can't necessarily say that if that ends up happening that Dubois is greater than Michael Moore. But then at the same time, we can't also say that, oh, well, he didn't have these amount of title defenses. So, he obviously can't be on the same level at all. Well, it wouldn't be comparable because Michael Moore did title defenses before he either ran into George Foreman or ran into Holyfield. Danny Dubois went immediately pretty much after Usyk, after he, went after Hrgovic and some of those other guys. So that's why you also have to take a look and see how great they were for the time and also that particular moment, and not always just at the amount of title defenses or how many, weight classes they've been a champion in, because sometimes that fighter can be great for the moment, but then they're never the same again. But I definitely understand what you're talking about. In terms of Hall of Famers for this era, I still think there's quite a bit, but it also depends on who you consider to be in the Hall of Fame. There's a lot of fighters I would put in the Hall of Fame, but are probably not in there. In my view, for fighters, for the majority of them, if you're a multiple weight division champion, more than likely you're a Hall of Famer to me, depending on the resume. But for cruiserweight, and for Usyk's resume, I would say Marco Huck, of course, is. Tony Bellew probably is, although I'm not completely sure. Maybe, I mean, Murat Gassiev, I'm not quite sure, but I don't think he was ever quite the same after Usyk beat him. Maris Bradis might be, because I think he defended his title a few times. Anthony Joshua and Fury, I definitely think will be, and Dubois, I think, has a chance. But it's hard to judge because, once again, Usyk beat those guys when they were young and undefeated, or some of them when they were looked at as, I think AJ and Fury is a bit different than when he beat guys like Michael Hunter and some of those other guys. But those guys, that's a little bit different because after he defeated them, they may not be the same. So I know what you're talking about, but I'd have to disagree slightly, but I understand what points you're trying to make. I don't completely disagree with you, but I think we have to take and it looked like he had more technical difficulties. But anyways, the point being is that um, we have to consider, I think, a little bit of what they've done and also how they were on the peak level. But anyways, okay, here he comes again. But okay.
I mean, heavy in the current era, like from the '90s era to this current era.
Yeah.
Do we have even four?
In terms of heavyweight, yeah, I would say so. In terms of you're talking about from the '90s onwards, or which ones are you, or like from what year onwards?
Besides Klitschko, Klitschko, you got Klitschko, you
Well,
got
that's a little
Vitaly.
bit tough to judge, and I actually want to bring up that point. Once again, I'm not a big fan of people bringing up this era was super weak. I'm not usually a fan of that, but there are such a thing as weak eras, and he ended up leaving again. But anyway, so okay, so when you talk about the Klitschko era or the Mike Tyson era, for example, those are examples of weak eras in my personal view. But when we talk about his question about is this person Hall of Famer worthy, when you talk about the Klitschko era onwards, yeah, you probably have Klitschko that definitely be in the Hall of Fame. You might have Alexander Povetkin that be in there. AJ Anthony Joshua, I think, will get in. I think Deontay Wilder will get in. I think Fury will get in. I think Usyk will get in. I think Dubois has a chance to get in. Andrew Ruiz might potentially get in. Joseph Parker might potentially get in, and some other guys. Not saying that they're as great as some of the other heavyweights or as accomplished, but yeah, you might have some of those guys that make the Hall of Fame, and that's not even me talking about guys like Samuel Peter and other guys like that. Well, Povetkin might get in because let me take a look at his career. I thought he had a certain amount of title defenses, and he does have some decent wins. But let me take a look here. Alexander Povetkin, Alexander Povetkin. Let me see. Let me take a look at this record real quick. I gotta look at my phone because this thing's gonna freeze up on me. But let's see. He was I believe that he won. Let's see, the WBA title, I believe, at one point in time. Well, maybe that was just regular. I don't know, but he might get in. He might. I'm not really quite sure. But let's see here. But I don't know. But that pretty much is about it, I guess, for that little conversation. If anyone else wants to join the chat or the but we're adding 24 years to 1 decade of the 90s. Okay, well, if you're talking about ever since the 90s, yeah, you have Vitaly Klitschko. You have like I said, you have Vladimir Klitschko. You might have Ray Mercer, who was still someone around during that time. Samuel Peter, maybe. I'd have to check on that. And then, of course, after that, I think Tyson Fury, AJ Anthony Joshua, Andrew Ruiz may make it in. You also have Deontay Wilder, who I think will make it in. You have, let's see, who else? Joseph Parker, maybe. I'm not quite sure. But he may make it in. And Danny Dubois, we'll see. We'll see. I'm not sure. But, we'll see what ends up happening. But the Hall of Fame is also a little bit of a debate because there are certain fighters that probably should be in that aren't, and there are probably certain fighters that are in that probably shouldn't be. But that's for every sport, But anyway, but yeah, if anyone else wants to join the chat or a live debate, certainly comment down below. If not, then I'll probably end the stream here in a few minutes or about 10 minutes. But let me know if y'all want to join the chat and bring up some points, and we definitely need the debate or talk real quick because I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be on here, but we'll see. But yeah, man, Usyk, I do believe, is an all-time great level fighter. Like I said, if you consider guys like Evander Holyfield an all-time great level fighter, I think that Usyk has to be there as well. Now we can debate that he's beaten more Hall of Famers if we want to, but Usyk has also beaten his fair share of Hall of Famers and elite level champions or great level champions, and some of them are not going to be considered Hall of Famers because after Usyk defeated them, they may not really be quite the same. In all honesty, and there was a lot of great undefeated talent when Usyk ended up defeating those guys. So yeah, Maris Bradis, Michael Hunter, Glowacki, Murat Gassiev, all those guys are undefeated. Then you get Marco Huck, who I'm not really quite sure if I consider an A-grade level fighter, but yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. Usyk pretty much beat everyone. Tony Bellew, so he has quite the resume, especially at cruiserweight and heavyweight. So I'm gonna have to say that. But anyways, man, like I said, if anyone else wants to join the stream or talk on here, certainly feel free. Man, there was a lot of comments that I probably should have went through on here, but I just didn't. So I apologize about that. But yeah, I'm seeing certain things about Usyk could compete in any era. I agree. Let's see. Thank you guys for who tuned in the uh, the stream. Thank you all very much. Let's see. You are almost right, boxing rules, but Tyson Fury was never officially on the pound for pound list because heavyweight aren't allowed to be on the list. Usyk was on it because he started at cruiserweight. Actually, you know what? That's a great point. Let me bring that up very quickly. So people are now also talking about this point, and I'm seeing some people doing this also to discredit Usyk. Like I noticed John Boxing Pound for Pound the Best did this. Actually, that is not the case. There has been a certain amount of heavyweights that have actually been on the pound for pound list. Now, if you want to make the point that heavyweights a lot of the times it's harder to put them on the pound for pound list, I would get that point. But to say that heavyweights are not usually on the pound for pound list, that actually is not correct. Muhammad Ali is one that would have been on there. Joe Frazier, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, all these guys would have been on the pound for pound list at one point in time. Vladimir Klitschko, and then eventually Tyson Fury. They all had pound for pound consideration. Even at one time, Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, at least on certain lists. I would have, probably never put Wilder top 10 pound for pound, but yeah. But once again, but yeah. So that's actually not true, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about that because I understand why a certain amount of people would think that. But anyways, Boxing Sage says, "Boxing real, dude. Nice. Caught you in a live. Thanks, dog. Much appreciated. Glad to see you here." This dude says if Crawford fought and beat Canelo, that would be the only fighter in his career to be a top fighter. And then comes Errol Spence Jr. In second place in Crawford's 16-year level career. I would agree with you. And that's why we can't always go with who's just a complete level Hall of Famer. But anyway, but yeah. So let's see. This dude says, if anything, number 1 would be Usyk, 2 would be Inoue, number 3 Canelo. I think Crawford deserves to be within the top 2. I just think that Canelo, that his dominance is starting to go down, and I don't think that the level of competition has been there lately. And I think that Inoue also needs to improve the level of competition just ever so slightly. But I mean, I could be wrong about that. Yeah. But let's see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. That's pretty much all I got to say. But thank you all for everyone that tuned in. This guy said Hrgovic wasn't a champion and Miller wasn't a champion, and that's true. But Miller was, he recently just ended up beating a guy, or not beating, but a draw against Andrew Ruiz, who was a former champion and still had a decent point in his career. Probably a fight that he should have won. And Hrgovic was an undefeated great prospect that was looked at as one of the top guys in the division. So I still have to give Dubois a little bit of credit. Usyk beat the best cruiserweight division ever. I'm not quite sure if it's the best cruiserweight division ever or not, but he beat a very talented cruiserweight division in my view. So I agree with you. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later. And that pretty much is the video that I wanted to make. So peace out. I'll see you all later. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed the stream. We'll do this another time, and that's about it for today. See ya. Thank you all so much.